Seo Jun-ho is part of a super team that take out monsters and fiends. He's the strongest of them all and is remembered as the greatest player ever, and no one has managed to overcome his legacy. One day, he and his friends go on a mission to take out the Frost Queen, where they all tragically got frozen and ended up in a cryogenic slumber. 25 years later, our hero wakes up from his icy slumber only to find the world more peaceful than he remembers it. But when he meets his old friend who's now the president of the Players Association, he's met with very bad news. New evil has emanated, and this time, they're humans who use their powers for evil, and they call themselves friends. Now with a different profile, Seo Jun-ho has to utilize every help he gets with new allies to take the fiends down and free his team from their frozen prison. Over at a very cold venue in Antarctica, our protagonist steps into this freezing throne room and is greeted by a system notification saying he's face-to-face with the Frost Queen. She's this girl in an ice suit, masked up, with white hair. She waves, all smiley, and teases him for ditching his buddies in some death trap to come here. She's really rubbing it in, asking how that feels. Meanwhile, the hero, a guy with brown hair and a mask named Spectre, doesn't care much for chit-chat. He draws his sword saying those friends of his aren't easy to beat. Besides, won't this whole Ice Age sequel be over after he thaws her plans? The Frost Queen laughs, thinking this whole thing's a joke, and tells the guy to finish her off, like he's clueless about what's really going on in this world. Spectre, or Jun-ho, which is his real name, holds his sword tight and asks her to shut it. Dark aura starts popping up around him as he gets ready to attack, saying he ain't got time to fool around. He's gonna kill her there and then. The Frost Queen pulls out her icy sword, and now it's on. Spectre is determined. If he can kill her, this whole nightmare ends. They dash at each other, creating a cold showdown that would send chills down your spine. The throne room floor cracks under the intensity of their fight, beams of blue and purple smashing into each other. Frost Queen's still smiling like it's fun for her, creating what seems to be an icy chidori. But Jun-ho isn't enjoying this one bit. He quickly dodges the Queen's attack. Suddenly, Jun-ho lands a quick attack on her and finishes her. She kneels on the floor, saying that it was fun, but Spectre replies that he can't say the same. Suddenly, this very bright light comes out from inside her body, and Jun-ho is caught off guard. The system notification pops up, telling him he's absorbing her power. His body starts freezing over, covered in ice, even his mask. He's stunned to see that the system is telling him he's going into hibernation to fully absorb her core. Cut to 76 hours earlier, at midnight at the South Pole. It's where the Frost Queen's nest is, and the last engine stands. This big buff dude with tattoos named Kali angrily slams his fist into the wall, shouting about how everyone else is going to die after coming all this way, as the system says only one person can climb the stairs. The heroes gather, and a girl with blue hair and a long dress named Skaya says they need to make a smart choice as they don't have much time left. She says that she believes Spectre should be the one to go. Another guy, with a hat and leaning against the wall, agrees. They're up against an ice-powered enemy, so Spectre should go. The tattooed guy is fuming, but even he agrees, reluctantly. They all think Spectre's the best shot at taking down the Frost Queen. Jun-ho asks them if they're sure they won't regret it. The guy with the hat jokes that if they die because Spectre couldn't win, yeah, maybe they'll regret it, but for now, they trust him. They all tell him that they trust him, and they believe in him. Fast forward 25 years to 2024. At some presentation, the host tells the story of how the world was in bad shape because of monsters, but 5 brave people went to the South Pole to deal with the Frost Queen. A host is on stage, hyping them up, talking about how the Frost Queen froze the Pacific Ocean with just one wave of her hand. The crowd is in awe, and some kid in the audience even shouts that this is about the Nest Attack team. The host proudly confirms it, saying these 5 heroes achieved something legendary, and calling the kids smart. But then things take a creepy turn. 5 ice statues of the heroes are displayed on stage, and suddenly, one of the statues starts cracking. The kid calls it out, but the host brushes it off, saying the ice statues are super well maintained, so nothing should happen. But cracks keep spreading. Before anyone can react, ice starts flying off one of the figures. Jun-ho falls out of the ice, shivering and barely standing. The system congratulates him for absorbing the Frost Queen's core 100%, giving him new freezing powers. Jun-ho gets up, still freezing cold, and asks what the heck is going on as people rush toward him. A photo of a guy shows up on the screen with a headline about him waking up after 25 years. Spectre, the legend, is out of his long sleep, fresh out of a cryogenic state. He's in hospital pajamas, sitting on the bed, looking weak. He tries to make a fist but can't. His body's shaky from being frozen for so long. He wonders if it's really been 25 years, staring at his hand in disbelief. He hears someone call his name. Doctors show up at the door. They say the president of the Players Association is on his way to see him. The protagonist turns around, all irritated, asking if he knows this president. If he doesn't, he'd send him away, as he hates being disturbed. The doctors say yes. The president's always called him a close friend. The protagonist thinks about it, touching his chin, trying to remember who that might be. Not many people could call him a friend. He thanks them for letting him know and decides he'll find out when they meet. He looks out the window at the rooftops and clouds. The world's changed a lot. This is the safe place he and his friends had worked for. But now, he feels gloomy. What's he supposed to do now? All he knows is fighting. Does this mean he's out of a job? He touches the mask again and decides he doesn't need it anymore. No more hiding. Junho takes it off, showing his face. The doctors are shocked, asking why he's doing that. He just smiles and says, "This world's safe now. No need for heroes anymore." They seem a bit unsure about that, and before he can ask what's up, a guy in a suit walks in with 2 guards, saying he'll explain. Junho sees him and is surprised. It's Deok-gu. The doctors start laughing about how the esteemed president can be called by his first name like that. The president tells the doctors that he'd like to have a private conversation with our hero, trying to save face. The protagonist teases him about his hairline, saying that he's always told him that he would get a V-shaped hair vertex. But Deok-gu looks at him more seriously now, and Junho asks why the doctors were worried earlier. Deok-gu looks down, sighing, and explains. He tells Junho that 25 years ago, when they took down the Frost Queen, everyone thought it was over. The system congratulated them, and people celebrated. But then, out of nowhere, the system announced an interdimensional elevator in the Pacific. A second floor unlocked. Turns out the journey wasn't over. There were more floors to climb. Junho is shocked, asking how far they've gotten in all this time. Deok-gu hesitates before dropping the bomb. They've only managed to clear 2 floors in 25 years. Junho can't believe it. He's frustrated. After all that, they're still stuck? Deok-gu tries to explain, but Junho's not happy with the excuses. Deok-gu then tells him about the 3rd floor, a volcanic zone that's been impossible to deal with because they needed the Frost Queen's core to cool the place down. Problem is, they never found it. But Junho knows the truth. He absorbed it himself. He thinks about telling Deok-gu but decides to keep quiet, for now. Later, Deok-gu suggests grabbing food, but Junho says no. Instead, he heads to the Seoul History Museum, wanting to see an exhibit about the 5 sleeping heroes. He doesn't want to deal with the journalists outside. Deok-gu agrees and tells him to come back to the hospital later. At the museum, Junho stands in front of the statues of his old comrades. He sits down in front of them, feeling guilty for being so late. He talks to them, telling them how the world has changed. This is the safe place they dreamed of. He pours out a drink, offering it to them, though they're frozen in ice. He takes a sip, smiling, asking if it tastes as sweet to them. While he's there, he notices dust on the statues and starts brushing it off. Suddenly, a system notification pops up. His freeze skill has leveled up enough to remove the ice from his comrades. Junho freezes, staring at the message. Could they still be alive? His hands start trembling, unsure what to do next. Junho, standing in the museum hall, feels confused as he looks at the frozen figures of his friends. He wonders how to bring them back, unsure if he can even remove the ice covering them. Suddenly, a system window pops up in front of him, showing that his magic rating is 18. He starts thinking this might be on purpose. The system lists out his abilities: Freeze, Guardian of Darkness, Night Hunter, Heroic Composure, Weapon Mastery, and Intuition. But the stats show that his current abilities are way lower than before, with a note saying they'll get back to normal as his level goes up. Junho doubts he can restore all his skills in a day or 2, but it still seems possible. He figures out that Freeze is key to unlocking his full power. The skill rating is marked as X, which surprises him. He remembers Deok-gu talking about how level S was supposed to be the highest anyone could go. Maybe he's the first to reach this mysterious X rank, but now he's struggling with his magic. As he looks at the system window, he notices he holds the title, The One Who Opens the Spring, which boosts his magic recovery speed by a ridiculous 500%. He figures he must have earned this after taking down the Frost Queen. Looking closer, he sees that each time he ascends the interdimensional elevator, his stats go up by 30 points. He pictures a tall tower reaching into the clouds and realizes that climbing the floors will help him get back to his old self. Not only that, but he starts imagining that he could fully control the Frost Queen's power. Junho stretches out his hand, thinking he can melt the ice and save his friends. He taps one of the frozen figures and then lightly punches it, frowning as he tells them to hold on just a bit longer. He promises he'll rescue them soon. Suddenly, a loud shout comes from the hospital. It snaps Junho out of his thoughts. Sitting with a bowl of soup, he looks up, surprised by the noise. Deok-gu is next to him, clearly annoyed by the sudden interruption. The young man beside them mentions how, 25 years ago, Deok-gu couldn't stop talking about wanting to retire. Deok-gu, adjusting his hair, says that jumping back into action isn't the best idea right now. Junho asks why Deok-gu is so against it, and Deok-gu explains that Junho needs proper rest before diving back in. Junho then remembers the fiends, those players who misuse their powers for selfish reasons. He pictures a group of people in dark cloaks, some attacking with knives, others involved in crimes like terrorism and murder. Just as this thought crosses his mind, a loud explosion rattles the building. Deok-gu sits down, tense, and wonders if the fiends have returned. Junho thinks about how those fiends wouldn't dare act up in his presence, but Deok-gu confirms that it's really them. Junho pictures these cloaked figures, noting how from the second floor of the interdimensional elevator onward, there are no surveillance cameras or satellites to track them. The fiends have grown bold, knowing no one can stop them. As Junho eats, Deok-gu talks about how dangerous it is for him to return. He suggests that Junho should abandon the name Spectre and just go by his real name if he's serious about coming back. When Junho asks why, Deok-gu explains that going by Spectre will draw unwanted attention, especially from enemies. Junho listens, still fixated on one goal, reaching the 10th floor of the elevator. Deok-gu looks confused, asking why Junho's suddenly interested in climbing that high. Junho explains that the 3rd floor is basically a volcanic zone, and they haven't been able to pass it. Deok-gu's face lights up as he jumps to his feet, asking if Junho knows a way around it. Junho calmly says they need the Frost Queen's core to cool it down. He then casually puts his spoon down, dropping the bombshell that he already absorbed the core. Deok-gu yells in disbelief, asking if he really took the core itself. Our hero explains it wasn't exactly on purpose. The core got absorbed into him after his Fiona and Cake boss battle. Panicking, Deok-gu grabs Junho by the neck, worrying about his blood pressure or something. Junho rubs his neck and reassures him, saying that's how he gained his freezing ability. Deok-gu connects the dots, realizing Junho can use that power to cool down the 3rd floor. Deok-gu then brings up Junho's friends, wondering if that's part of his motivation to return. Junho doesn't deny it. Silence falls between them before Deok-gu checks his watch, remembering he needs to deal with the doctors who saw Junho's face. He considers it the least he can do after everything. Junho, feeling pleased, claps his hands and calls Deok-gu the best. Relaxing on the bed, Junho explains that his level reset to 1, and all his stats have been reduced. Deok-gu confirms it, looking at Junho's status screen. As they talk, Junho casually asks if Deok-gu can arrange for a new player license. Deok-gu says that guilds are more powerful than the Players Association now, and that it's customary to attend in-person exams to get a license. He holds up a card, explaining the new system. Junho, feeling tired, leans back on the bed, realizing that things really have changed. He feels that this might be a good opportunity. Standing up, he's excited about the exam and can't wait to see what's next. The next day, over at the Players Association building, it was time for the license exam. The protagonist walks into the crowded hall, looking at his ticket, serial number 75. Looking around, he thinks about the money spent for this opportunity, the atmosphere feeling laid back as participants wait for their turn. He grabs a seat, saying to himself that he's got time to kill. Black flashes flicker around him, so he decides to eavesdrop on the conversations nearby, using his dark guard skills to sharpen his hearing. Purple words fill his mind as he listens in on talk about the morning news. Someone conquered the ancient dungeon on the 2nd floor, and today's examiner is none other than Deok-gu, the association's president. Someone nearby says that this is their 4th attempt at the exam. Staying calm, Junho watches as a bright blue screen appears, announcing that candidate number 1 is up. The screen shows a room where a guy stands with a pole, and as the countdown begins, monsters pop up inside. A participant nearby comments on the impressive fighting spirit of the first candidate. Swinging the pole, the guy pushes the monsters back, earning admiration from the crowd, but the candidate starts doubting himself as the fight goes on. Junho observes, thinking a spear would be perfect for this situation. He sighs, knowing that swinging it wildly wouldn't help. Soon enough, the first candidate gets knocked down, and his failure is announced. The tension in the hall rises as Junho gets ready for his turn. Finally, his number is called 75. The man behind the glass says they're almost done, with just 4 more candidates left. 2 examiners complain that none of the participants so far have met the basic requirements. Deok-gu asks them to speed it up and call in the next candidate. Junho walks in, meeting the surprised stares of the examiners. The guy with dreadlocks asks who he is, noticing Junho's collection of weapons, a sword, bow, throwing knives, and a spear. Another examiner, a man in a vest, crosses his arms and comments on Junho's slim build, while the dude in a suit remarks that he's probably just another Spectre imitator. Deokgu, watching closely, finds it amusing that Junho is trying so hard to stand out. When they ask if he's ready, Junho confirms with confidence. The exam begins, and a group of dwarves materializes around him. The system tags them as small and weak. Junho smiles, remembering old battles, and calls for an attack. The green dwarves rush toward him, but with quick movements, he takes them down, scattering blue pixels as they fall. He quickly realizes that more will spawn if he just keeps killing them, so he needs a plan. Drawing several blades from between his fingers, he swiftly throws them at the dwarves, hitting his mark with precision. Thinking back to archery lessons from a famed archer, Junho draws his bow and fires arrows, hitting multiple enemies in one go. He mimics the stance of his friend Gilbert, feeling a surge of confidence. As the dwarves continue their charge, Junho draws his sword and makes clean, calculated strikes, the blade leaving marks on the floor as he moves. He takes out even more of the dwarves. Eventually, the announcer declares that candidate number 75 has passed the exam. Standing alone in the now empty room, Junho reflects on the fight, feeling the strain in his muscles. He realizes he needs to improve his physical training. Back with the examiners, one of them talks about the protagonist's impressive performance. Another examiner agrees that he surpassed expectations. A girl in the group points out that he's not just some Spectre copycat. His skills with the spear, bow, and sword set him apart. The guy with dreadlocks notes his remarkable combat abilities, while the dude remains skeptical about the investment needed to train him further. The girl says they gotta avoid making rash decisions, saying that they should think carefully about bringing Junho in. Deokgu, sipping from a cup, feels rather confident. He's sure Junho will fit right in with the Players Association. As he sets the cup down, though, Deokgu feels kinda guilty. After all, he's been fabricating his profile along. The info window pops up for Junho, showing he's passed the exam, but not much else is filled in. Later on, Deokgu's not too happy, watching Junho just chilling on the couch, munching on chips, and laughing at some stupid novel. It's a funny sight because Junho is supposed to be that top player everyone's talking about, and yet here he is, goofing around 2 days after getting out of the hospital. Deokgu's got responsibilities weighing on him, and he tries getting Junho's attention. He forces a smile and asks what Junho's reading. Turns out, it's some story about a priest, but instead of healing people, the guy's off fighting battles. Deokgu can't believe it and questions Junho's taste in books. I'd question it too, to be honest. He then sits down, telling the protagonist to stop reading and check out the info he pulled up. Junho flips through a bunch of glowing windows. Deokgu asks why he's interested in these gates nobody's conquered yet. Does he really plan on going there at his level? Junho opens a blue window, showing that no one's managed to clear those gates. He's picturing the monsters and traps inside, thinking about the other players who entered and disappeared, leaving just that scary blue portal wrapped in barbed wire. The protagonist says that only newbies can enter, and Deokgu warns him that it's super risky since high-level players can't even help. They both look at the entry rules for the dungeons, which usually chew up and spit out anyone who tries to level up in there. The president can't believe Junho wants to tackle one of these dungeons right now, but our hero reassures him that he knows what he's doing, saying these gates are a big problem for the association. The protagonist imagines a big pile of gold with an hourglass on top, thinking the rewards would be huge if he conquered it, since no one else has for years. Deokgu asks if this is his plan to level up fast, and Junho says it is. The president looks exhausted, reminding him he just died and came back. Couldn't he find a safer way to power up that isn't dying again but permanently? Junho says he needs to rescue his friends still trapped in the ice prison. He says they'd do the same for him, so he gotta at least try. The president tries talking him out of it, saying this is a dangerous road to take, but our hero has his reasons. He needs to get stronger fast to face the fiends. Deokgu goes quiet, thinking maybe he didn't get how much pressure Junho's feeling about the battles ahead. He knows the fiends are trouble but prefers not to tell him how bad it could get. Then he checks out the info on the gates. The blue system window shows the gates have been around 7 years, and 142 players who tried all turned into a full-course meal for monsters. Deokgu goes over the details. This Curse of Dawn dungeon's for level 1 players only, with a team cap of 10. The goal is just stay alive till dawn. Easy, right? There's only problem. It's earned the nickname, Grave for Beginners, so you're gonna find out why. Junho reads the entry requirements and thinks they look doable. His watch lights up with a notification that his deposit came through. Deokgu points out that Junho now officially works for the association for the next year. Junho's surprised, asking what that means, and then a masked figure jokingly says he's Junho's loyal sidekick now. Still lying on the couch, Junho asks about where he'd stay at the association. Deokgu says they've got a building for players, and even suggests he could get a room with a nice view. Deokgu holds a box, saying that Junho could get a whole floor if things go well. Curious, Junho peeks inside the box and pulls out his new uniform, a flexible black jacket. Junho's surprised by the quality, asking why it feels so good. Deokgu proudly says it's made by the famous Quan Noya. Junho's stunned, wondering if the old man's still around. Deokgu says Noya's about to hit 98, but his grandson is running the shop now. Junho thinks it'd be nice to go visit, but Deokgu warns him to keep it low-key. When Junho asks why, Deokgu says the fiends are probably watching, and showing up to visit Noya might raise some red flags. With a hand on Junho's shoulder, Deokgu says he's shared their situation with the staff and tells him to focus on getting stronger. Junho's grateful for the uniform and starts thinking about what weapons to use. Deokgu tells him he can pick something from the association's stockpile, though he warns Junho that they won't compare to Noya's work. Dressed in his new black uniform, Junho wonders when to start his dungeon run. He considers jumping right in, but decides he should get some practice first. Feeling worn out from just passing the exam, he admits he needs some training if he's going to go against monsters and fiends. Deokgu asks how long he'll need to prep. Junho thinks a month is too much, but Deokgu insists 10 days should be enough. 10 days later, Junho's in Yang province, standing next to the glowing blue portal. He smiles, absolutely ready to take on the Curse of Dawn Gate, planning to survive till morning. Junho stands in the middle of an old cemetery, breathing heavily with a hand over his chest. He feels strangely at ease here, looking around at the crooked tombstones. He smiles to himself, thinking he might actually be losing it if he finds this place cozy. Right then, a system window pops up, showing info about the Curse of Dawn dungeon. From what it says, he figures the capture conditions aren't too bad. All he has to do is make it till dawn, and he's come at just the right time. He imagines people rushing into the portal, thinking that teams who entered early morning held out the longest. He also learned time moves differently inside, so people entering in the afternoon can't adjust and end up fighting immediately. He pictures a bloody hand lying in the dirt, realizing how hopeless it must feel when all players inside are level 1 or lower. With a slight frown, he thinks about his own prep and feels he's ready for this. The moon hangs over the forest. Sitting under a tree, Junho reads a book, half aware of the feeling that something is watching him. He rolls his eyes, wondering if it's spirits rising up from the ground. Suddenly, a hole appears in the dirt, and a dead hand bursts out, grabbing his leg. Calmly, he materializes his sword and gives the monster a smack on the head while it's still sheathed, telling it to stay underground. The dead creature stops moving. Looking around, Junho senses more evil spirits nearby. He activates his Night Hunter skill, his eyes glowing a bright green. The system notification pops up, saying his senses have sharpened. Spirits crowd around him, and he realizes that beginners have a tough time with these monsters, especially since zombies don't feel pain. One of the dead jumps at him from behind, mouth open wide. He grabs his sword with a reverse grip, landing a strike on its head, thinking it's hard to deliver a killing blow since they just ignore the damage and keep attacking. He turns, watching more zombies rush at him. He swings, taking off their heads in one stroke, noting how good these monsters are at making beginners panic, especially since they don't have strong skills yet. Standing among the corpses, he starts to understand why this place is called the Grave of Beginners. Behind him, the ground opens again. He tells himself he's not just any beginner anymore. Another dead creature rises from the dirt, and he casually kicks it in the head, feeling a lot stronger than when he started. Just then, he notices a whole group of dead approaching and sighs. There's still a ton left. Breathing heavily, he leans against a grave, wondering if any more monsters will show up. As he's catching his breath, he hears someone call out, asking who's there. He looks around, a little surprised. The voice calls again, asking him to come closer. Junho jumps up, hearing faint crying coming from a coffin half buried nearby. He approaches the grave's edge, asking if someone's really down there. The voice answers yes, confirming they're waiting at the bottom. Junho starts digging up the dirt with his hands, asking the stranger how he ended up here. As he clears the dirt, the stranger explains he trusted his friends and followed them, but everyone but him died. Junho calmly looks at the coffin while the stranger begs for help. Junho touches the lid and asks if the stranger can scream really loud. Under the full moon, the stranger asks why. Junho says he needs to know his exact location. Suddenly, a loud scream bursts out from the side of the cross on the coffin. Junho says he finally found it, then fires shot after shot at the coffin lid until the cross shatters, shells falling to the ground. Junho stands up, wondering how this gate managed to wipe out over 100 people so easily. He asks the stranger if he was the one who set up this grave of newbies. Right then, a giant monster bursts out of the coffin. Junho calls him a liar, drawing his sword. The monster asks how he figured it out. Junho leaps up, swinging his blade and slicing the monster in half, saying there's no way anyone could survive an unconquered gate. He pictures players outside, staring at the gate. He realizes that when a capture starts, the gate doesn't open unless every player inside is gone. He imagines a player pointing at the gate and thinks that, deep down, people must know this, yet they still go in on instinct. Resting his knee against his sheath, he figures it makes sense. Even if all the zombies were a challenge, they weren't unbeatable. The real threat was the trickster. A system window with his stats appears in front of him, announcing he's defeated all monsters and overcome the Curse of Dawn. He notes he's leveled up 4 times, with his lost stats finally back. Though he hasn't gained much in stats up to 100, he's satisfied. Standing in the middle of the field, he looks at the window that pops up. The system announces his reward, a new skill, Confession of the Dead. He thinks he's luckier than he expected. The system explains the skill gives him access to the memories of the dead. Imagining a skull crackling with energy, Junho realizes he can now see memories of dead people. He looks back at the defeated trickster and thinks this skill must be his reward for the win. Though specific, he decides the ability will be helpful. He feels the power, knowing it belongs to him, Seo Junho, and not Spectre. Junho and his friend sit together in the office. Deokgu talks about how the world hasn't been quiet since Junho's return, with barely a single peaceful day. Junho agrees, pointing out that the man's smile suggests he's kinda happy about it. Deokgu laughs, saying it's amusing to see the proud guild members so uneasy. Junho says that the guild wouldn't risk leaking information, but wonders why the journalists keep stirring things up. And Deokgu takes the opportunity to ask if he plans on revealing himself soon. The protagonist responds it's not the time yet. Deokgu says that if people knew he was the one who cleared the gate, he'd be a sensation. Junho gives his friend a knowing look, asking if he knows why people buy luxury items, even though they're all made in the same factories. Deokgu, raising his hand in curiosity, guesses it's because they're pricey. Junho agrees, explaining that it's the exclusivity, the feeling that not everyone can have it, that makes these items special. The president looks at his own gold watch and asks if Junho's aiming to be the luxury item of the hunter world. The protagonist says that he doesn't just want to be exclusive but a legendary limited edition, something everyone craves but no one knows how to acquire. Deokgu notes Junho's aim to spark curiosity. Crossing his arms, Deokgu adds that Junho's competitive streak always seems to show at moments like this, even asking what his blood type is just for fun. Ignoring the question, Junho remarks that he can't leave people guessing forever. Deokgu remembers Junho's stance before the gate and realizes that observant folks will soon notice he's going after another unconquered gate. He pictures reporters with cameras waiting at the next gate, ready to capture Junho's arrival. Junho closes his eyes, hand raised in contemplation, remarking that even if he doesn't reveal himself, the world will eventually piece things together on its own. Deokgu is kinda amused by Junho's sudden concern with appearances, and without explaining further, asks if Junho wants to grab some food. Junho waves it off, saying he ate not long ago. Deokgu persists, saying that good nutrition is vital. Later, Junho is drenched in sweat, his hand pressed against the ground as he counts, reaching 71 while balancing on one hand, feet in the air. Each push-up seems harder than the last, but he powers through, calling out the final number in a trembling voice before using a burst of strength to finish with an explosive push. Collapsing on the ground, he lets out a relieved exhale. The system congratulates him, announcing a 1-point increase in his strength. Lying there, looking at the ceiling with a content smile, Junho spreads his arms and breathes heavily, feeling truly alive. He drinks some water and checks his watch as multiple system windows pop up. His eyes fall on the words, Lef's Garden, and he thinks about how it's Korea's oldest unconquered gate, untouched for 9 years. Picturing a blue gate in the middle of a field, he remembers that if a gate remains open too long, monsters start spilling out, wreaking havoc on innocent lives. Such gates are known as open gates. With the government and association offering huge rewards, players from across the country have risked everything to try and capture Lef's Garden. Junho's mind darkens as he remembers the sad reality of Lef's Garden. Out of 124 attempts to conquer the gate, everyone ended in failure. He thinks of the lengths players went to, even hiring Tushar Vishi, a highly skilled archer from India, a recruit so promising he could rival entire guilds. Yet, despite his immense potential, Tushar met his end in this place, his future cut short. With a sigh, Junho thinks he could easily share that same fate if he isn't fully prepared. He looks over his stats. Everything but magic now surpasses 30, a strong level for him. But as Tushar's bloody defeat warns, a trap might be hidden within this gate. Getting up from the floor, Junho decides it's time for careful preparations. Stretching, he summons mana into his palm, watching as it shapes into a familiar weapon. Confident in his skill, he looks forward to testing it in battle. He steps through the portal to Luf's garden, finding himself in an endless pink field. His system window opens, showing the gate's condition. He must destroy every monster. He frowns, remembering the groups of 4 that fell before him. There's likely a hidden danger. Moving cautiously, he spots a maze in the distance but avoids it, opting to chill out in a spot for nightfall when the creatures are known to appear. As it gets dark in the garden, the plants move violently, and massive tree monsters pop out, driving their limbs forcefully into the ground. Junho watches them closely, crossing his arms and calling it a warm welcome. One monster lashes at him with blinding speed. Junho launches himself upward, his spear tip embedded in the ground to propel him skyward, narrowly avoiding the attack. In midair, he gathers mana in his hand, summoning an ice spear. He swings and hurls it with such force it pierces through the monster, embedding itself deep in the ground. Landing beside his weapon, Junho pulls the spear free as more monsters emerge. He twirls his spear, marveling at the strength he now wields. But his words are cut off as another monster attacks. Without missing a beat, he narrows his eyes, sidesteps, and goes on the offensive, weaving between enemies with quick, powerful strikes. Each slash, each dash, dismantles the monsters around him. But as the last one falls, a crowd of monsters approaches from the distance. Junho's face turns pale as he realizes they've doubled in number. He wonders if defeating them only brings more, multiplying like Pain's summoning animals. Junho hit the ground running like he was in a horror movie now, sprinting away from the advancing horde of monsters, his mind racing with questions about how many these things even are. One monster jumps at him, forcing him to pivot and block with his blade. He summons mana, creating an ice shield to intercept the attacks. Wooden tendrils slam against his barrier, cracking it, but he presses forward, eyes narrowed as he slashes through the crowd, slicing monsters in half. While feeling a bit tired, he complains about the task's difficulty, stepping over a monster's head and wondering why past attempts failed if a group of 4 should have managed. He remembers Tushar and the other skilled players who once attempted this gate. If they faced off against the swarm together, they could have been unstoppable. As Junho's spear goes through the last monster, a system message flashes. He's captured Luff's garden. Dawn breaks, and he lets out a relieved smile, the accomplishment feeling real good. Standing before the labyrinth's entrance, he's met with a chilling mist coming out from the inside. He steps inside, passing blood-splattered walls and skeletons, haunting reminders of those who perished here. Fresh corpses scattered on the ground tell him these players tried escaping, but found no way out. Pausing, Junho sees a skeleton holding a bow like something straight out of Minecraft, but it's the Tempest bow this time. Recognizing its swirling wind power, he realizes this belonged to Tushar, the young Indian prodigy. With a moment of respect, he lowers his head, whispering an apology, and takes the weapon. In his hand, the bow feels almost alive, its energy echoing the unpredictable path of a butterfly while flying, which basically gave it that name. Beneath the skeleton, Junho spots a dusty journal. Opening it to April 7, 2044, he reads about Tushar's commission to capture Lef's garden. In the beginning, Tushar was excited and buzzing while accepting the challenge, even with warnings about the gate's difficulty. The last words from his mentor was asking him to reconsider. But Tushar, ever the extreme difficulty game player, still wanted to do it despite the fact that the gate hasn't been captured for so many years by even the most powerful players. He just listened without saying anything. Then his mentor adds, a little worried, that he might not make it back. Tushar puts his hand on his chest, closes his eyes, and says that since the Koreans asked him for help, he can't just refuse. It's against his god Vishnu's teachings. Looking down, he sees he's at level 10 now, and that this could be his only shot at getting into Lef's garden, so he has to take it. Later on, he goes to meet his girlfriend, Zaya. He turns to her and asks if she's really sure she's going with him. She turns around, confirming it, saying that if he's going there, then she's definitely going to follow him. She takes his hand, smiling, and adds that she believes in him and will go wherever he goes. Then she says if he'd said no, she would have found a way to get there anyway. She's just happy he asked her along. She covers her mouth, joking that she has to protect him. The Indian hero looks a bit surprised, but he smiles back, feeling grateful she's coming. His lover looks up at him warmly, and he tells her he trusts her more than anyone. She looks down, smiling, saying she knows because they're partners. They touch foreheads softly, and did more lovey-dovey stuff. Then after that, Tushar says that they'll capture the gate no matter what. Somewhere else, a little girl is running as fast as she can, yelling for her dad. A dark-haired dude spreads his arms out to catch her, lifting her up. She asks where he's going this time. He smiles and says he has to go to work but will be back soon, adding that she should listen to her grandma while he's away. The girl looks a bit sad but accepts as she can't stop him, then makes him promise that when he's back, they'll go see the animals together. He touches her cheek, agreeing, reminding her to eat well and listen to grandma. His friend Tushar watches this from nearby. The dude turns to Tushar, saying they're ready to go. The Indian hero apologizes for the situation, but the guy just smiles and reassures him. In the little girl's room later, he tells her it's his first big trip, but everything will be fine since grandma's with her. He explains that he promised his friend Tushar, so he can't back out now. Tushar looks a little surprised, but grateful. The guy with glasses says he's on a team with a rising star, so he's expecting his cut. Tushar laughs, saying they're on, and that he's probably looking forward to it. Over at New Delhi Indira Gandhi International Airport, the two adventurers walk with suitcases. Tushar waves to Zaya, who greets him with a smile, with Ram, their last teammate, standing right behind her. Tushar shakes Ram's hand, saying it's been a while, then thanks him for coming. Ram replies, saying Zaya was pretty insistent. The Indian hero opens his journal to the entry from April 23, 2044. He's pulling back on his bowstring, saying that the gate's waiting for them. Tomorrow, he'll shoot an arrow straight through another one. Everything's going well today, and he thinks it's a good sign. And after that, the next day, they enter the Left Garden. The guys look around in awe, saying that the Left's garden is very beautiful. One of them says it's his first time seeing a gate like this. Something about it seems almost magical. But quickly, they snap back to reality, remembering this is a dungeon, not a tourist spot. They decide to scout the area before doing anything else. The next journal entry is dated that evening. It is dark at Left's garden, and monsters are starting to approach. The guys start to feel uneasy, wondering if they might have underestimated the dungeon. As they start fighting, one of them with glasses yells out, "There are already 32 monsters." The group fights off the monsters as much as they can, with monsters falling dead one by one. But then a massive tree creature pulls up, aiming its deadly branch at them. It unfortunately hits the man in glasses, taking out a bad amount of blood. Tushar turns around, shocked, and orders everyone to fall back. Ram carries their injured comrade and makes a run for it, with the girl following close behind. Tushar shouts for everyone to run towards the labyrinth, while Zaya asks him to hurry. He tries to process how, with every monster they take down, the numbers just seem to multiply, like the game difficulty is increasing. It feels like pure chaos in this dungeon. It really doesn't make sense. Later in the day, the man with glasses, barely holding on, turns to Tushar, asking him to take care of his daughter. The whole group falls silent, and they eventually bury him there in the garden, with them standing by his grave. Tushar bites his lip, tearing up real bad. One of their own has fallen, and it only gets worse from here, it seems. Later that night, Tushar sits alone at the labyrinth's entrance, watching the beautiful sunset. He folds his hands in prayer to Shiva, asking for a blessing and the strength to carry on, so he can write on his diary again tomorrow. As he gets a bit tired, he writes some stuff in his diary, though with his hand shaking a lot. He writes that they've just fended off the fourth wave, but a fifth is still about to start. There were about 120 monsters this time, but the team brought the number down to around 40. He says that he can handle the rest by himself, and they should be able to leave the garden by tomorrow. He looks over at Zaya, who's already fast asleep and very weak. He ends it by writing that he hopes there wouldn't be a sixth wave. But then, deep into the night, everything changes. Tushar carries Zaya's lifeless body in his arms, staring down at her in disbelief as tears spill down his cheeks. He holds her hand tightly, remembering his promise to capture the gate, but it makes no sense if he isn't capturing it with her. Ram watches, calling Tushar's name in his mind, and reaches for his weapon, a blade coated in poison, and calls out for him to die. Ram makes his move, dashing forward and swinging his weapon, ready to strike. Tushar sees the attack in the reflection of his orb, and he quickly dodges, but still takes a painful bleeding blow to his shoulder. He gets up to his feet, turning to face Ram, who's now giving him an evil smile, with his eyes glowing with a strange red light. Ram taunts him, saying he didn't expect anything less from India's rising star. Tushar holds his wound painfully as he realizes his former ally Ram is a fiend. He yells out, accusing him of betrayal and asking how he could be a fiend when Zaya herself brought him along. Ram just laughs, saying he's never heard anything more naive and calling Zaya a fool just like him. Ram raises his hand, casually saying he didn't know there'd be so many monsters here either. Maybe he should have helped his so-called friends out a little since they all died off so quickly and left him in danger. Tushar is really pissed now, But Ram just laughs, mocking him for capturing the gate only to hand it over now and join his dead friends. Suddenly, Tushar looks a bit scared, not of the loser fiend that's about to get rammed, but something else. Behind Ram, a swarm of monsters emerges and the Indian hero makes a run for it. Ram taunts Tushar for running away in fear despite his anger. But then he says it doesn't matter. Tushar is doomed either way, thanks to the poison laced on his blade. Tushar dashes off, the wound on his shoulder oozing blood as Ram turns around, only for the monsters to tear him to pieces like it's lunchtime. Watching from a distance, Tushar thinks that this is the beginning of the sixth wave. As he runs through the labyrinth, he feels his hand going numb, with a deep purple colored stuff spreading around his wound. He realizes the poison is taking effect, and as he reaches a dead end, he collapses to the ground. He opens his diary, painfully writing that he can't feel his hand anymore, and noting that Ram's blade was poisoned. Whether it's the poison or the monsters, he knows he doesn't have long. With each painful stroke of his pen, he writes a final message, that if anyone finds this diary, please tell their families he's sorry. He weakly prays for forgiveness, and curses Ram at the same time. He prays to his god Shiva to judge the fiends and avenge him. Sometime later, Junho finds the diary beside the skeleton and flips through the pages, feeling the weight of Tushar's story. Realizing the brutal logic of the dungeon, he understands why he faced fewer monsters alone. Just the thought of coming with 3 others and facing endless waves of monsters makes him feel sick. He closes the diary and turns to the bow Tushar left behind. He takes it, vowing to use it to finish Tushar's mission, not for personal gain but as a promise to avenge him. Junho leaves and pays his respects on the way, calling Tushar the true, unforgettable hero of India. The next day, Deokgu bursts in, all fired up, and slams a newspaper on the table. He proudly waves around more newspapers and magazines, saying the whole world already knows he captured the gate before they even had a chance to say anything. The protagonist sighs, saying he already warned everyone this would happen. But Deokgu keeps going, saying he's dying to tell everyone at work. Junho says that Deokgu didn't have to come all the way here for that. He could have just sent a Vita message. But Deokgu says nope, it's only polite to deliver big news face to face. Then, he adds, by the way, the Indian government's sent him a message too. Junho remembers handing over the diary to the Indian guy and says he's glad they appreciate getting it back. Then, Deokgu says the families of the fallen players have been told. The protagonist replies that that's good. But Deokgu's not done. He turns around saying he's a little hurt. Junho looks at him, confused, asking what that's about. Deokgu replies that it's the national defense weapon that India lost, and which somehow vanished from Tushar's inventory. The protagonist pulls the bow out of his inventory, and Deokgu is really surprised. He yells, asking if he's completely lost it. He's freaking out, asking why the protagonist's even holding the bow in plain sight. Deokgu grabs his head like he's about to explode, saying if the Junho's keeping it, he should hide it properly since he knows that bow's technically government property. But the protagonist just says that he'll just borrow it for a bit and return it. Deokgu asks him if he plans on telling them a ghost warrior passed it down. Junho replies, saying he'll figure out something and reassures him he'll be careful. Deokgu's had it. He's saying that everyone's already declared the bow missing for good. But the protagonist waves him off, saying he plans to use it to draw out the fiend. Deokgu's not convinced, saying that fiend's already dead. But the protagonist just that says maybe there's more than one creep out there who wants the bow. Somewhere, standing on a cliff, a dude with a skull tattoo on his arm is angry about something, probably feeling some ominous vibe. The boy says the fiend would definitely come running for this bow. Deokgu sighs, finally a bit calmer, but he brings up one of the fiends on a wanted poster, Cal Signer. He warns the boy that getting into Leaf's garden isn't a solo act. You need to be at least level 10. The protagonist says that the next time he steps into an unconquered gate, the fiend's likely to pounce. He adds that this guy's probably even stronger than Tushar was. Deokgu throws his hands up, saying that Junho's in serious trouble and really should be letting the Indian government know. But Junho just says he's got it under control. Then he asks if Deokgu actually thinks the fiend's got a chance against him. Deokgu just stops talking, now looking kinda serious. He says he'd probably be just as confident if he were in his shoes. But then he places a hand on the protagonist's shoulder, looking right into his eyes, saying he's still worried. The protagonist calls himself incomparable and tells Deokgu he doesn't need to stress because the messy stuff from 25 years ago, definitely not happening again. Deokgu sighs, finally letting it go, saying that the boy's still the same. Junho replies saying that's just who he is. Just then, Deokgu's watch beeps. He takes a call and says that some news is not exactly what he planned. Rubbing his head, he says something about passing it on. The protagonist just stares, asking what's up. Deokgu sighs and says the reporters have shown up, buzzing around like flies. The protagonist gets a bit happier because of this, and Deokgu adds that everyone's figured out he's the player who cleared the gate. They want interviews now. Jumho waves it off, telling him not to refuse. He says since he's going to be fighting fiends anyway, maybe he should just pick the spot himself, and he suggests they hold a press conference. Soon enough, a massive hall is flooded and packed with people, and our friendly neighborhood president, Deokgu's typing up an article, writing something dramatic about a player's curse and Luff's garden, hyping up the next star. In his mind, he's picturing the guy like a shining jewel among treasures. Then, everyone looks up as the main man himself. Junho steps onto the stage in House Samdita slippers, scratching his head. Reporters are hella confused, like, is this really the all-powerful OP rookie who tackled 2 unconquered gates? Maybe he just stepped into the conference by accident? Junho just yawns, introduces himself, and announces they've got 30 minutes max. Deokgu's really surprised as reporters shoot up their hands, yelling out questions about the gate, his first big win, how he feels, where Zoro is, everything. Junho casually asks if they'd like to know about the Gate of the Curse of Dawn. One journalist stares, realizing this guy's seen plenty and knows how to handle the spotlight. But Junho's looking at his watch, and then he says he's got time for just one last question. The journalist asks if he's picked his next gate yet. Junho replies, saying that he hasn't, though there's one he's eager for, but it's still out of his level range. The journalist then asks which gate that is, and Junho says he's dying to enter the Eastern Sea Gate. Pens drop, cameras start flashing, and the goes wild, totally fired up by his answer. The protagonist stands there, just soaking up the camera lights and all that noisy energy. Reporters are practically launching themselves at him, shouting his name and buzzing about that gate he mentioned. The big, bad, super scary Eastern Sea Gate. Calm as ever, he looks at the mic, probably already picturing the glow of that portal in his head. The journalists level up the drama, tossing out ideas about how he'd be the first to pull 3 insane missions like he's playing against beginner bots, making him some unbeatable legend. His only reaction is a little smile with his eyes closed. They can't believe it. Half of them are already flipping through their notes to make sure they heard right. A girl with glasses asks a question about some terrifying top-tier monster rumored to live inside that gate. Another reporter butts in, explaining the association's been whispering about ranking this one as the scariest gate ever, though he personally thinks it's a bit much. But our guy? He's unfazed. Imagining monsters just prowling under a huge red moon, he gets that all-too-calm look, probably thinking about how these beasts would even turn regular monsters into their loyal squad. The reporters keep looking for any sign of fear in his face, but he just looks all unbothered, like, yeah, he'll handle it. In no time, headlines pop up all over the web, announcing that this dude's practically calling himself the winner already. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a couple of higher-ups start checking out the buzz. The dude wearing glasses can't stop laughing, saying it's been ages since news from ground level was this entertaining. His colleague is half ignoring him, though. He's more interested in dropping sugar cubes into his coffee, saying it all sounds like skill if he pulls this off again. In the end, both agree. If this guy actually nails a 3rd big mission, the head honcho would be after him in no time, maybe even inviting him into the guild. But back at home, the protagonist is just chilling with a magazine, barely looking up as he and Deokgu are going through a mountain of some petitions. He's bored out of his mind, clearly not impressed with any of it. The protagonist just leans back on the sofa, waving off the paper and staring at Deokgu, who sits across from him. It's only now hitting him that these are all petitions filled with demands. His reward for being the superstar from the press conference. Deokgu smiles, calling him the new big shot, then flips through a few papers, pointing out the promises of experience points, low difficulty, and good money that come with these requests. Only, he explains, finding an assignment with all 3 perks? Almost impossible. The protagonist says that he's fine ditching the good money part. But Deokgu shakes his head, saying if he wants to stay in demand, his first job better be top-notch. He hands over a file, and the protagonist raises a brow as he reads it. Turns out, it's a request from a dad whose daughter's terminally ill. The mission is to hunt down a medicine called the core of the cinder fox. Deokgu even pulls up an image of this green fox creature glowing like a neon sign, saying the cure's buried somewhere in its core. The protagonist's face barely changes, only saying that it's been ages since he's even thought about that name. Deokgu reminds him of the old days when the guy faced off against this beast himself, back when he was still a rookie player. The protagonist just gives a dead look, like, yeah, almost didn't live to tell that tale. Deokgu taps his shiny watch, saying the gate for this beast, the Cinder Fox, is nearby, and he's already pulled up the latest data on it. They both turn as a new notification pops up on the screen, grabbing their attention. Deokgu points out it's only been around for 3 months, so technically it's not unconquered yet, but it's already swallowed up 7 teams like snacks. The protagonist looks at the screen, probably remembering the days he roamed as Spectre and how things were way more hardcore back then. But, Deokgu reassures him, players are stronger now than they used to be, so it's not as brutal as he might think. The protagonist smiles, clearly unconvinced. Since his comeback, he hasn't met a single player worth his time. After a pause, he tosses the petition back on the table, deciding he might as well take the assignment and see if these new-gen players have anything impressive to offer. Deokgu sighs like a weight's been lifted off his shoulders and casually says that the request actually came from a friend. With that, the protagonist asks who it's from, as the company's logo pops up on the screen in red hieroglyphs. Deokgu explains it's from Myungho, his buddy's company, showing he's got a bit of history there. The protagonist's mind does big brain work. Sounds like Choi Man-hyuk's son is somehow involved. Deokgu explains that he's actually talking about the second son, Choi Pil-ho. Right then, a knock on the door grabs their attention, and in steps a brown-haired girl in heels, dressed sharp in a white shirt. This is Cha Si-yoon, here to meet the president. Deokgu introduces her as Junho's new secretary and assistant, casually noting that it'd be smart for Junho to stop leaning so heavily on him to keep rumors down. Junho just agrees, thinking it's probably for the best. Si-yoon introduces herself with a polite bow, and they shake hands, though she's more formal than Junho expected. Deokgu reminds him to discuss everything with Si-yoon now and vouches for her skills, and she thanks him with a lot of respect before heading out, ready to prove herself. Next thing, Junho finds himself in a car with Si-yoon at the wheel. She's asking if he's familiar with Myungho Company, to which he replies it's the big name around here, famous for handling taxes and keeping the royal family's secrets locked down tight. As they enter a dark tunnel, Si-yoon's tone shifts, bringing up a family tragedy. She explains, telling them about Choi Pil-ho's daughter with 9-yin severance syndrome, a rare condition that only something with high yin energy can cure, like the core of the elusive Cinder Fox. When they exit the tunnel into daylight, Si-yoon dives into Spectre's legacy, recalling how he defeated the Cinder Fox 29 years ago, an accomplishment she deeply admires. Junho tries to play it cool, even covering his mouth in embarrassment, but she catches on, noting his reaction. She drives them to the gate of a grand estate, where Junho steps out and smiles, recalling that nothing has changed since he was last here. Si-yoon curiously asks if he's been here before, and he admits it was a long time ago. As she walks to the gate to check on their meeting arrangements, they both hear someone call out to them. It's 2 men walking through the gate, with the older one introducing himself as Choi Pil-ho, greeting them with a warm smile. Si-yoon is awestruck, recognizing the chairman himself. Junho returns the greeting, calling it an honor to meet him. Pil-ho shakes his hand, clearly thrilled to meet the hero who's taken on the gates and protected citizens' lives, gripping Junho's hand with unexpected warmth. Junho feels a bit thrown off by the intensity in Pil-ho's grip as the man leans in, his face earnest, eyes pleading, saying his only wish is for his daughter's health. Holding Junho's hand even tighter, he asks, nearly begging, for Junho to save her from the terrible illness. Over at Choi Pil-ho's place, everyone gathers around the table, and Junho casually brings up that Pil-ho's after the core of the Cinder Fox. Pil-ho confirms that yes, that's the plan. After digging into all the research he could find, Pil-ho found one case in France where they used the core to treat someone with 9-yin severance syndrome, and he's dead set on getting the same for his daughter. Ready to make it happen, Pil-ho announces that he's willing to put up a whopping 1.5 billion won as a reward, and Cha Si-yoon stares at Junho like this is the jackpot. But Junho's not sold. He calmly says it's just not going to cut it, which leaves Pil-ho completely stunned. Seriously, who turns down that kind of money? The chairman tries to sweeten the pot, pushing the offer up to 3 billion won. Still skeptical that's even enough for this guy. Instead of pulling over in a hard bargain over the cash, Junho opens his hand and explains he doesn't care about the amount. In fact, 1 billion would have done it for him. Junho goes on to explain the backstory, saying that back in the day, Spectre sold a core for 10 billion won to a French billionaire. The man had begged for the core to save his daughter, even offering his entire fortune. But Spectre, who apparently had his own code, took only the 10 billion. Pil-ho, relating hard, admits he'd go to the same lengths, and that's when it hits Junho. This isn't about the money. It's about family, about saving someone who matters. Later on, Junho's hanging by the car, waiting, while Si-yoon parks. Sitting behind the wheel, he mentions the story of Spectre's team, and Si-yoon looks over, wondering if he got the tale straight from Deokgu, knowing he and Spectre were tight. Junho asks her if she really believes in all this, reminding her how people say Spectre's like a machine, cold and unfeeling. But she's got a different view, guessing that Spectre wouldn't have acted that way if he was heartless. In her eyes, he's actually kind. Junho mentions Spectre as a hero in a sarcastic manner, but Si-yoon's dead serious, she's convinced, even more after his comment. In her mind, she remembers an image of Spectre's bloody hand, her thoughts on how he lost his parents right in front of him. She figures that's why he only took the 10 billion from that rich customer, thinking he wouldn't have even asked if the person couldn't afford it. The protagonist stands there, a bit dumbfounded, as Si-yoon explains her thoughts on Spectre. She figures anyone who went to such lengths to save family would never want others to go through that kind of pain. With pink clouds drifting in the sky, the protagonist says that only Spectre himself would really know. A little later, the president, Deok-gu, smiles in a sarcastic manner and shifts the conversation as they stroll down a long hallway, asking how Junho likes the view so far. Junho says that he doesn't know much about Si-yeon yet since they've just met, but she seems nice enough. Deok-gu just says that soon enough, Junho will find out what she's really made of. As they walk, the president shares that Si-yoon's actually top tier, capable of landing a job at a big company or a renowned guild. But she's here because Spectre is with the association. He adds, lucky them for landing someone like her. They stop outside a door, and Junho is wondering what's next. Deok-gu, clearly noticing the player's curiosity, places his hand on a scanner, and the door swings open. He says that if Junho's planning to face the Cinder Fox, he'll need equipment that matches the challenge. Junho steps forward, taking in the room packed with magical weapons, each one sealed in high-tech capsules. Deok-gu strolls in, pointing out how much technology has advanced over the last 25 years. As Junho scans the weapons, the president explains that today's weapons pack a punch. With designs so advanced, even seasoned players are impressed. Then Deok-gu tosses him a sword. Junho catches it, standing opposite Deok-gu. The president suggests testing it out with a bit of magic, and as Junho raises the sword, it lights up, glowing so brightly it catches him off guard. Watching the sword from beneath his brows, Junho sees the magic aura swirling around it, making the blade almost look like it could slice through anything. Deok-gu explains that even a small amount of magic turns this sword into a monster skinning machine. The protagonist gives it a swing while Deok-gu demonstrates with hand gestures, saying that the sword can even generate a magic shield when charged with his magic. It's high-tech gear, as Deok-gu points out, and in today's world, who could resist using it? More of these swords sit under the counter. Junho stares down at the rows of weapons, wondering if regular players rely on these fancy toys too. Deok-gu isn't sure, saying most players have custom gear now. But Junho realizes none of these weapons would hold up against the real deal. He recalls his intense showdown with the Snow Queen, remembering how a battle with a serious monster messes up even the best magical defenses. This weapon in front of him, he thinks, wouldn't last a second against something like that. Lost in thought, Junho asks Deok-gu if he knows why weak players only face weak monsters. The president agrees that a strong monster would wipe everyone out in seconds. The protagonist gets a bit amused as he looks at his own skill card floating in the air. It's funny, he thinks, how fair the system really is sometimes. He explains that players have to grow, facing only what they can handle, and then eventually, they're ready for tougher opponents. Deok-gu seems a bit confused but curious and asks if Junho thinks these weapons would work against stronger monsters. Junho confirms, in his opinion, they wouldn't stand a chance. Deok-gu laughs, crossing his arms, agreeing that anyone relying on this alone wouldn't get far. He does admit, though, that they're useful for some low-level gates. Junho checks out a pile of equipment in the corner. He picks up a sword out of curiosity, and Deok-gu explains it's made from the latest materials, but doesn't have any special powers, hence why it's collecting dust. Swinging the sword, Junho gestures toward the line of machine guns on the wall, ridiculing the idea of fighting monsters with these weak weapons. Deok-gu watches, slightly shocked, as Junho swings away, explaining that gear like this limits the player's potential to get stronger. Meanwhile, outside in the square, swarm of reporters are in the thick of it under the sun, a blonde newscaster in the middle of it all, covering a portal opening up over the plaza. People gather around, with cameras all over the damn place, catching every moment. In the car, Cha Si-eun hands Junho a mug of lavender tea and tells him about all the hype around the mission to capture the Cinder Fox core. She adds that 26 other players from various guilds are joining him, but Junho just nonchalantly takes a good sip of the tea and says that it's really good. Putting his tea down, Junho tells his secretary that she might have to be waking up earlier every morning from here on. Cha Si-eun, a bit confused, wonders why she'd have to have the military's sleep schedule. With the media already chasing him, he says that this win would only bring in more commission requests. Journalists with cameras are all over the protagonist, firing questions like crazy, wanting to know if he's really working for some big shot from the Myungho group, and if he's excited to team up with other players for once. Off to the side, Two players give him the classic side-eye, clearly unimpressed. The protagonist jokes around, saying he always knew rankers would be around and makes fun of how players from their region tend to chill on the sidelines. Some girl nearby talks about how everyone's talking about this guy now, and naturally, every reporter's dying to get an exclusive. Junho finishes with the interviews and puts his sword over his shoulder, moving through the crowd, barely looking back. Another player spots him and doubts that this guy really captured the gate twice, thinking his sword is straight up garbage. The girl beside him figures there's gotta be more in his arsenal than that one scrappy sword. No way he'd show up empty-handed. The dude in a red jacket tunes into all this chatter, realizes they're wrapping up interviews, and readies himself for the raid. So he and his crew head into the magical portal. They step through to the Blazing Dunes gate. As they step inside, they realize it's just an endless, scorching desert. The second they touch down on that sand, complaints start pouring in about the insane heat and the sand everywhere. Then, the dude calls out for everyone's attention and introduces himself as Cha Min-woo from Cheonghai, the 13th ranked Korean guild. Everyone's surprised. An elite guild has shown up. It's obvious these aren't just any players. This is the best of the best. Cha Min-woo quickly spells out the situation. He makes it clear that there's no way anyone's making it through this kind of hardcore gate solo, so he suggests they keep things cool and avoid any fights. He's got an offer too. His guild's putting up 10 million won for anyone who follows their orders during the raid. The catch? They want the core of the Cinder Fox as the main prize. Players aren't happy. They start shouting from the sidelines, mad that the guild's offering pocket change while going after the big reward. They're all calculating and realize that even if everyone says yes, it's only going to add up to 300 million won. Not worth it. Some players say they'd rather see if the guild can even take down the Cinder Fox without their help. A bald guy in the guild tells everyone that they'll take good care of them. But if anyone wants to switch sides later, the reward's only 5 million. Reluctantly, players start agreeing, eyeing each other with uncertainty, but they're all in for now. Junho is walking up the hot blazing dunes, his face half covered with a handkerchief to block the scorching desert heat. He's barely taken a few steps when Cha Min-woo, watching him scale a huge dune, calls out, suggesting Junho should join their group. But Junho, without missing a beat, looks back and lets him know he's going solo. Some Cheonghai guild players watch Junho's figure as he leaves, and Min-woo's chunky friend snorts, saying all those rumors about Junho being a genius and their big hope must be way overhyped if he thinks he can go solo here. Min-woo doesn't even seem worried though, turning away dismissively. Meanwhile, Junho walks along a deserted dune, lost in thought about the Cinder Fox, a creature somewhere between a beast and a myth. With every tail it grows, it controls more soldiers, and once it gets to 9 tails, it becomes a legendary fox god, keeping watch over its kind from above. Junho scans the endless desert, planning to find a hidden spot and stay under the radar. Back at the main group, Cha Min-woo suddenly freezes, staring ahead in shock. Out of nowhere, a hill appears in the sand, and enraged foxes start leaping out of it. 30 wild fire foxes charge forward in a tight pack. Min-woo, barely holding in his excitement, orders his team to hold their ground and wait for his signal, the anticipation thick in the air. Finally, he shouts for them to attack and chaos erupts. The bald guy reaches for the shining pallet, while Min-woo's hefty buddy grabs hold too. Around them, a series of transformer towers activates, trapping the foxes in a deadly electric ring. Every fox that tries to push through gets zapped with a powerful shock. The sight leaves a couple of players staring in awe, wondering if this electrifying plan is actually going to work. Cha Min-woo charges forward. To him, these foxes are relics from an era of ancient weapons and primitive fighting styles. This, however, is the age of tech warfare on humanity's second floor. Min-woo's team goes all out. His plump friend fires beams from a cannon while the mage unleashes spells from the back. They're set on proving that, with high-grade tech and a few electric tricks, they're more than a match for these mythical foxes. The guy tells his team leader they've already taken down over half of the foxes, saying if they keep it up, capturing the Cinder Fox is just a matter of time. But the team leader only gives him a sarcastic look, saying if his subordinate's going to talk, he might as well take down at least one monster to back it up. Meanwhile, the bald guy and the red-haired girl are teaming up, slicing through foxes left and right. She realizes she'd been nervous for nothing, and the bald guy reminds her it's probably because they've got the power of the Cheonghai Guild backing them up. Suddenly, though, a massive shadow falls over them, and the bald guy looks up, freaking out as he spots the Cinder Fox right above. He shouts out, alerting everyone that the boss, the Cinder Fox, has arrived. With her 9 massive tails, she makes the whole place feel even hotter. Around her lies a mess of dead foxes. Now this gets her very mad. The players freeze when a notification pops up, officially announcing her as the boss of the Blazing Dunes. The bald guy and the other dude stare in shock, realizing that this fox queen has 9 tails, remembering that even the specter barely survived against a six-tailed one. Cha Min-woo turns and spots the towering figure of the Cinder Fox, immediately calling everyone to regroup and keep the line tight. The Cheonghai Guild's with them, he declares, so they're going to take this monster down. With intense focus, Cha Min-woo grips his shining blade, claiming that no matter how monstrous this beast is, it's done for with a strike to the heart. As if responding, the Cinder Fox gets ready to blast, and Cha Min-woo says that his trap is several times more powerful than what they've already used. He's certain this monster won't be able to break free once it's caught. As he looks at his trap, he's already picturing victory and surpassing the legendary Spectre himself. But the Cinder Fox isn't giving them a moment. She charges forward, shooting a huge blast of destruction straight from her mouth, turning up the heat on the battlefield and letting them know she won't go down without a fight. After the Cinder Fox gives them a blast, literally, the players all lie scattered and unconscious across the sand, defeated and drained. Cha Min-woo just stares at the ground, looking at the ruined trap nearby. Nothing had worked, not the weapons, not the traps, not the plan. He starts to tear up as he watches the Cinder Fox waving those deadly tails. In his mind, he's been defeated. He can't see any way to beat a monster like this. The fox creates another large fireball, and Cha Min-woo sits frozen in the sand, half wondering if this is how it all ends. Then, with the perfect entrance, the protagonist steps forward, standing with his back to Min-woo. The squad leader, still on the ground, looks up, asking what the heck he's doing and ordering him to get out of there. But Jun-ho isn't budging at all. He pulls his sword out, locking his target on the massive fox. As the fox hurls its fireball straight at the group, the light blinds Min-woo and he covers his face, sure it's over. But somehow, Jun-ho slices through the fireball with his blade, showing the monster that the real blockbuster movie starts here. Immediately, Jun-ho turns to help the wounded, lifting Min-woo and instructing him to get the survivors out. Min-woo stares, asking what Jun-ho plans to do, but Jun-ho just looks back, holding his sword steady. He's staying to finish what they started. As the fox raises its head again, about to blast again, some other player tugs the squad leader away, asking him to leave quickly. Jun-ho waits until the last player retreats before turning back to the Cinder Fox. He promises a little fun now that they're all alone. He holds his sword out, preparing for the fight, as the Cinder Fox summons a barrage of fireballs overhead. The real showdown is just getting started. Jun-ho leaps into action, dodging the barrage of fireballs with his sweet, sweet moves. He throws a hand forward, summoning ice to create a shield that blocks the flames coming at him. Looking through his frosty barrier, he analyzes the fox properly, realizing it's not going to let him get close to fight, without a fight. It's more of a keep your opponent at bay kind of fighter. He keeps inching toward the beast, but the Cinder Fox is onto him, gathering energy to form a massive fireball above its head. Seeing this, Jun-ho's heart skips a beat. He finally shows that he's human after all as he shows fear here. It's like nothing he's faced before, and he knows his body might not handle the blast. With a deep breath, he braces as the enormous fireball rockets his way, slamming into the ground and erupting in an explosion that sends sand and smoke everywhere. The fox waits, watching the smoky aftermath with sharp eyes, swiping a claw through the haze, only to find nothing. Then, without warning, Jun-ho appears overhead, sword at the ready as he swoops down onto the fox's face. Just as it opens its mouth to spit flames, he quickly summons an ice platform mid-air, launching off it to dodge the fiery breath. Jumping between platforms he creates mid-air, he locks his target on the creature's tails, knowing its power depends on each one. Channeling ice into his blade until it glows with a frosty blue energy, he attacks, landing a swift, powerful strike on one of those tails. The tail cuts off cleanly, falling to the sand as he slides down. His plan worked. As he watches the fox stagger, he's sure its strength has taken a hit. In the Minecraft overworld, two guys hang out by a tent, munching on noodles as they keep an eye on the red gate down the street. One of them, brown-haired, points out that it's been 10 hours since the team entered the portal, which gets him a slap on the head from his friend, the dude, who calls him out for disrespecting the dead, especially when the last team didn't make it past 2 days. They sit back to back, just staring at the gate, knowing all they can do now is hope those players come out in one piece. Back in the portal, it's chaos. Ice shards fly everywhere as this giant fox is going wild, flinging its tails with its mouth open in a furious roar. Right in front of it, Jun-ho stands with his sword, taunting the fox. For the first time, it's feeling real pain, and he makes it clear she's not the hunter anymore, she's the prey now. The fox swings her paw to strike, causing a mini explosion as she tries to land a hit. But Jun-ho is already a step ahead, his aura glowing blue as he goes straight for her neck, meeting her stare with a deadly look. Then with pinpoint accuracy, he strikes right into her eye. Fireballs appear above the fox's head as she desperately tries to turn the tables, but Junho presses forward, his sword flashing with blue energy as he lands blow after blow. The fox lets out a howl, stumbling under the onslaught. Then she gathers energy and hurls a massive fireball at him, but he just calls her out for using that tired move again. With a flick of his hand, he conjures a giant block of ice, blocking her mid-attack. It's over now, and he knows it. In the aftermath, Junho stands in the empty desert, watching the defeated fox collapse. He feels very relieved, and he finally lets himself fall to the sand, exhausted. The system alerts him that he's done it, defeated the Cinder Fox and scored the coveted Cinder Fox core. Outside the portal, it's just a quiet, peaceful night until a reporter spots movement. A woman calls out that the players are coming back, and a guy with a camera can barely believe it. Did they really clear it? As the portal glows green, the reporters start buzzing. 13 hours and this team did it, while the last group fell after 2 days. Then, through the green glow, player Cha Min-woo appears, carrying one of his injured teammates. Reporters rush forward, the reporter with her microphone eager to catch the story. Medics push through, ready to help as the weary players finally step out of the gate. They roll the protagonist on a stretcher as he appears to have passed out after stopping Swiper the Fox from swiping. As the medics roll the stretcher, Junho lies there, barely conscious, looking like he's totally out. Cha Min-woo sits in the ambulance as they wrap a bandage around his head. A medic finishes up and asks if he's ready to get to the hospital, but Min-woo, looking sideways, thinks he needs to address the crowd first. Facing the flashing cameras, he sees reporters surrounding him, their microphones shoved forward. One asks about his feelings as the victorious team leader, while another mentions the rumor that the Cinder Fox had 9 tails, saying that it must have been insanely tough. Someone else points out that Cha Min-woo's name is trending everywhere, calling him a hero. The team leader is lost in thought, drifting back to a memory of his classroom. His teacher announces that they're discussing future goals, starting with Cha Min-woo. Younger Min-woo, smiling big, says he wants to be a hero like Spectre someday. Back in the present, he blinks, snapping out of it. He looks indifferently at the crowd, then admits that he knows this victory isn't really his. With the green gate glowing behind him, he promises to share everything that went down inside. Meanwhile, Junho wakes up, seeing what seems to be an IV bag hanging beside him. He's in a hospital room, realizing it's morning as his secretary, Cha Si-eun, sits next to him with a gentle smile. She welcomes him back, explaining it's already 6 a.m., and he's in a Korean hospital, then asks how he's feeling. Junho rubs the back of his head, saying he's fine. Si-eun shares that she's been sorting through tons of scent orders while waiting for him to wake up, admitting he was spot on about their popularity. Junho swings his legs off the bed, asking if that's true. Si-eun looks shocked as he heads to the door, asking where he's off to, and he tells her he's going to visit Chairman Choi Pil-ho, who's probably been waiting. The morning light streams in as she, worried, reminds him that he's still not fully recovered. Junho admits he's a bit weak, but he insists the real patient needs him more right now, saying he'll find time to rest later. He gestures for her to follow, saying it's time to go. At Choi Pil-ho's house, the protagonist walks down the corridor beside the chairman, who thanks him for arriving so quickly. Choi Pil-ho looks concerned, asking if Junho is sure he's all right since he heard that he fainted at the gate. Junho smiles awkwardly, rubbing the back of his head, explaining he just fell asleep from exhaustion. They stop at a door, and Choi Pil-ho says it's his daughter's room. When Junho opens the door, he finds the girl lying in bed, her thin arm resting on the blanket with an IV drip. Junho frowns, worrying real bad as he sees she's in worse shape than he thought. He opens his inventory and pulls out the core of the Cinder Fox, saying that it's time to get started. He looks at the chairman and quickly realizes that he is covering his eyes with his hand from the intense heat. Quickly, Junho puts the core back in his inventory, realizing that the core's heat could hurt a normal person, and apologizes as he forgot to tell them that. He then asks if the chairman would mind waiting outside. Choi Pil-ho looks at him with concern, admitting he should have asked earlier if it was safe to use something so dangerous on his daughter. He wants to know if she'll be okay. Junho reassures him, saying not everyone can perform this kind of procedure, and that he learned it from Spectre, so there's nothing to worry about. Choi Pil-ho says that Deokgu had informed him about Junho's skills. He shakes Junho's hand, lowering his head sadly as he asks him to take care of his daughter. Junho gives a slight smile, promising it will be over soon, and then he enters the room, closing the door behind him. Approaching the girl's bed, Junho takes out the glowing core from his inventory. He realizes her condition is worse than the last patient he treated, and that he needs to melt her frozen magical power with the core's heat. Suddenly, he notices a black aura coming from her body. A system notification pops up, telling him he senses mid-level dark energy from the girl. Junho realizes he can absorb this dark power using his freeze skill. As he begins to absorb it, another notification informs him that his magic points will increase. Confused, he thinks back to how he defeated the fox with ice and created a shield, realizing the freeze skill has no drawbacks and can boost his magic points when absorbing dark energy. He looks, considering whether the freeze skill could absorb dark power from the 9-yin severance syndrome. He wonders if the Dark Guardian skill might also be able to receive something from this dark power. Looking down at the girl, still frail and weak on the bed, he decides he needs to end the 9-yin severance syndrome quickly before her condition gets any worse. Extending his hand above her, Junho channels blue energy, focusing on removing the dark power sealed inside the girl's body. A blue glow envelops her, and he tells himself he'll end this in one go. The bright light fills the room as he remembers how he melted frozen magical power with the warm energy of the core last time, stressing the patient's body. This time, he plans to absorb just the right amount of dark power to restore balance without pushing her too hard. Meanwhile, Choi Pil-ho sits anxiously in a chair, waiting for news. Cha Si-eun watches with wide eyes, her hand resting on Choi Pil-ho, who has his face buried in his hands. When Pil-ho finally raises his head, he sees Junho wiping sweat from his forehead. He asks how the treatment went, and Junho, slightly out of breath but smiling, assures him that everything is all right. The girl is healthy, and there were no complications. Tears fill the chairman's eyes as he looks at Junho in disbelief. Overwhelmed, he falls to his knees, covering his tear-stained face with his hands. Later, in a sleek white car racing down the road, Cha Si-eun tells Junho he needs to rest when they return to the association and take a break from physical activity. Sitting in the back seat, Junho scoots closer, thanking her for making the errand a success. Later on, Choi Pil-ho shares that he's been thinking for a while about how to repay Junho for his help. He says that he initially wanted to raise the reward amount but realizes that wouldn't really interest Junho. The protagonist insists he only did what he had to do and that the chairman's gratitude is enough. However, Choi Pil-ho looks at Junho with confidence, stating he's already made his decision. Junho's really surprised as the chairman declares that whenever Junho needs help, the Myungho group will do everything possible to assist him. Junho's mind races with thoughts of a towering high-rise building under the clear blue sky. Realizing the Myungho Group is the top company in South Korea, involved in every industry, he thinks about the guild mark and the players, coming to understand that the real strength of the company lies with the chairman's firstborn, the master of the Red Tower Guild, which holds the 5th rank in Korea's guild rankings. Junho realizes that if the players from the Red Tower Guild are called in at the right moment, they could be a huge help. He smiles slightly at Choi Pil-ho, promising to use this information wisely so the Myungho Group's reputation stays intact. The chairman insists Junho should reach out whenever he needs support, expressing his gratitude for saving his family. Meanwhile, yellow lights shine from the high-rise building where Daegu sits in a chair, a smile on his face as he thinks about Junho. He says that he recently spoke on the phone with Pil-ho and is glad to hear his daughter is finally better. Sitting at a table, the director looks over at Junho on the couch, asking how he's feeling. Junho responds that his muscles are a bit sore, making Daegu ask if he's been secretly taking some miracle cure. The player just opens his inventory, joking about what kind of cure the director means. He notes that his level has increased a lot, along with his stats, which explains why he feels so much better. Then, Junho shifts the conversation to the main topic. Daegu gets really surprised when he sees the core, and he quickly shields his face from the bright light. He asks if it's the core of the Cinder Fox, and Junho confirms it, clarifying that he didn't use it to heal the chairman's daughter. Instead, he explains that he absorbed the dark power using his freezing skill. Daegu jumps up from his chair, bewildered, asking if Junho really did that. The protagonist replies that the system notified him, and his magic points increased. He starts to freeze the Cinder Fox core, revealing he learned something valuable. His freezing skill can absorb dark power from any object. Daegu leans in, curiosity shining in his eyes, and asks if that means any object at all. Junho confirms it, explaining he can absorb dark power not just from illnesses like the 9-yin severance syndrome, but from anything. Daegu, looking thoughtful as he studies the frozen core, questions how a disease that modern medicine can't cure only has medium-level dark power. Junho reassures him that it is indeed possible. The director contemplates this while stroking his chin, deciding he should look for suitable items. Junho says he hasn't done that in a while. Under the starry night sky, Daegu warns him not to create any unnecessary problems. Junho asks him why he'd think he would even do something like that. Finally getting time to go touch grass and receive some sunshine, Junho realizes that the player market is like an offline shopping frenzy that stretches worldwide, not just in Korea. The streets are jam-packed with people under the bright sun, and he's almost shocked by the sheer number of items coming out of the gate. It's not just players here. Regular folks are crowding in too, making it tough to move. Wandering among the huge crowd, he remembers his last trip to Insadong and notices how much livelier it's become. He spots a little kid handing a flower to a girl at a flower stall and smiles, thinking about how people used to be all about survival when the gate first showed up. Things seem a lot brighter now. The sun even makes posters on the walls glow, but today, he's got his mind on one thing: the black market. He heads into a theater and plops down in the 8th hall, seat G10, munching popcorn as a bootleg Elsa does her thing on stage. His seat has this exclusive device, a teleportation portal that only players can use to get to the black market. Soon, he starts glowing blue, talking about how bad this teleportation skill is for motion sickness. He remembers how his teammate Skya once joked she'd rather use her magic any day. Smiling at the thought, he begins to vanish from his seat, eager to meet up with everyone. Suddenly, he's in Ethiopia, the dark underground city, with bright blue lights marking the black market right in the middle of the street. The whole vibe here is intense and exclusive, way different from any other place. Each player market out there? Just a doorway to this hidden world. He looks around and spots a dude in a bad mood yelling at a passerby, with others huddling in dark alleyways, gossiping about gang members who've gone missing, and a mystery guy called Spectre. Hands shoved in his pockets, Junho strolls down the shadowy street, where no one's here to casually shop or play tour guide. Regular rules don't fly here. It's like society's laws took a vacation. He catches some whispering about Janov supposedly catching a gate and thinks, yeah, this place is definitely not the safest to hang out in. Then he notices a bearded guy standing under a neon sign, arms crossed, like he's guarding the road. Junho figures most of the big shots have already moved up, so the odds of facing someone who could really mess with him are pretty slim. He tells the bearded guy to step aside. The guy looks back at him, confused, then steps out of the way. As Junho passes, he gives the guy a puzzled look, surprised that he actually moved without a fight. A bald guy sits behind the counter, giving Junho a warm welcome as he steps inside, lips pressed in thought. The bald dude hypes him up, calling him Korea's most famous player. Junho's just here for the artifacts, though, so the guy points him to the shelves and tells him to go browse. Junho strolls over, scanning the shelves without high hopes. There are necklaces and weapons on display, and he realizes he might actually have some luck here. Even if they're low-level items, they could still give his magic points a boost. He feels some chilly dark energy from one object, then a bit of ice energy and yin from another. Right when the bald guy's looking at him, Junho tells him that he heard from a few novices that he keeps the real strong beast weapons in a secret room inside. The bald guy gets really pissed off and he slaps the counter, clearly unhappy, asking where Junho even heard such nonsense. He tries to deny it, but Junho just makes it clear he already knows the score. Holding up a shiny golden necklace, Junho teases the old man, saying he'll take a quick look in the secret room if he buys a few trinkets from the main shelves. He promises he would keep his secrets and hold up his side of the bargain. The bald guy marches to the door, talking about loose-lipped idiots, and starts typing in the door code. The bald guy gestures him inside, where the best artifacts are in. There's a shelf in there with a few powerful stuff, but everything the protagonist checks out isn't interesting enough. The bald guy's still clearly flustered, and Junho spots a glove with a cold powers, saying that it has potential. The bald guy yells at him to stay back, claiming it's got a serious freezing ability that's detrimental to the user. Junho slides it on anyway, his hand glowing with a blue aura, and the old man's cigarette drops from his mouth, looking like he's just seen a ghost. A system notification flashes up, calling it the Glove with the Frost Fairy's Wrath, and it's a rare item. It can gradually numb and freeze its user. Another alert tells him it's pulsing with mid-level ice energy, and he could break its curse by absorbing it. Junho checks out the glove with a pleased smile, thinking it's mid-level, similar to the tricky 9-yin severance syndrome he'd dealt with before. Thoughts of the chairman's dark aura daughter flash by, and he figures this could pack some magic power. He declares he'll take this with the other artifacts he picked, and the old man told him thanks. Over at the bar, some dude's polishing glasses as Junho enters, catching some curious stares. He slides onto a bar stool and orders a teleport back to Insadong in Korea and a drink. The bartender says he'll have a 10-minute wait. Junho faces away from the other customers, who can't stop looking his way like some A-list celebrity taking a walk in the ghetto. As he sips, a group strolls over looking like bad news. One asks if he's really the Junho famous player. Junho raises the glass to his mouth, giving him a sideways look. The dude goes on about hearing big things about him as an up-and-comer, throwing in some fake pride as his senior. Junho's mentally noting how shady the black market is, where it's best not to stick around too long. He imagines these guys vying for validation, since guild invites and job offers hinge on players' reputations here. But he knows all too well that with each new achievement in the gates, it gets tougher to keep breaking records, so some spineless players resort to acting tough to feel relevant. Then the big dude breaks Junho's glass with his weapon, barking that he should respect his elders and look at him when spoken to. His friend says that Junho clearly needs a lesson in manners, since he didn't get it the first time. Brown-haired guy throws in that Junho should be grateful since they've been clearing the streets of thugs while he's been focused on his skills. The dude puffs up, bragging about his 5 years of experience, and Junho laughs a lot, holding his stomach. The group stares, looking at him like he's lost his mind. One in a hood says that he must be nuts. Junho asks if they're really claiming to be street cleaners. He looks them up and down, throwing them a sarcastic smile, saying that all the real credit goes to the first-gen players, not wannabes like them. Standing up, he adds that all these guys really do is bully newbies and try to get their names in some cheap tabloid. Now the street sweeper dude is steaming mad, looking at Junho with fury. Junho calmly asks them what they're worth, daring them to bring it on. He stares them down, telling them not to hold back, saying he'll feel even better pounding the sense back into punks like them. Junho stands at the counter, casually eyeing the 3 wannabe thugs while the other visitors look on at the showdown about to throw down. One guy in the back is wondering if this is the same Junho everyone's been talking about. The dude next to him agrees, saying that if they beat him here, it'll make headlines. But just then, some guy in the stands calls out to the troublesome dummies, saying they'll look ridiculous taking down a rookie for fame. But the guy doesn't care. He sizes up Junho, thinking that talk is cheap. All that matters now is who's left standing. The protagonist opens his inventory and pulls out a small dagger. One of the guys says that this is the same Junho who took down the Cinder Fox, about to get stomped by the Gangnam Trio. Meanwhile, the bartender looks over at Junho, looking puzzled as he asks how much longer until the teleport's ready. The bartender says it'll be about 4 minutes. Junho steps up and says that 4 minutes is plenty to have a little fun. The giant raises his spear, pointing it at Junho with a blank look, introducing himself as the life-severing lance of the Gangnam Trio. He claims Junho should be honored to fight him, of all people. Junho just grips his dagger and asks if he seriously thinks he needs anything bigger to squash 3 bugs. The life-severing lance charges forward, shouting that Junho's a real piece of work. But Junho barely bats an eye, casually sidestepping the spear and grabbing it mid-swing. He pulls the big guy off balance, sending him stumbling forward and lands a clean elbow to his face. The crowd goes wild, while the other 2 thugs are dead-ass frozen. The big guy hits the ground with his nose bleeding, and his eyes roll back. The other dude stretches his hand, summoning red needles in the air as taunts Junho, saying he won't get out of this one so easily. The hooded guy, clearly annoyed, yells at his friend, wondering why he took the bait. The red-haired guy sends his needles flying, but Junho smoothly jumps to the side, dodging them. The hooded guy charges forward with his sword in hand, shouting at his buddy to attack, but Junho sidesteps him too, parrying with his dagger in one swift move. The red-haired guy watches Junho, looking nervous now. He thinks this kid's probably just some rookie who's fought a few monsters. No way he's ever taken down a human. He pictures his friend's spear going right through Junho, thinking these guys are way too sure they'll win, which is exactly why they're in trouble. With a crazy look in his eyes, he smiles big and tells Junho this is what makes them different, and that they were never planning to play nice. The hooded guy's on the ground, groaning, as Junho steps on his shoulder. The brown-haired guy yells in pain as Junho pulls his arm, then lets go and turns to the red-haired guy, giving him a cold stare. The red-haired guy's face falls as he watches Junho come closer, still not understanding how this rookie kid is winning. His friends are laid out on the ground, and he starts casting a spell, sending red needles flying at Junho, thinking, no way they're losing this. Junho just slashes through the needles, eyes sharp as he remembers his old days as Spectre. He thinks back on how he took down tons of bad guys, knowing it's all about reading how they move. Dodging the last needle, he charges forward. The red-haired guy backs up, looking shocked, as Junho pins him against the wall and says his moves are way too easy to predict. With a calm, serious look, Junho lifts the guy's hands and pins them to the wall with his dagger. The guy squeezes his eyes shut in pain as Junho just steps back, shoving his hands in his pockets. He walks up to the big guy still lying on the floor, looking down at him with a blank stare, saying he better hope they never meet again. The brown-haired guy, looking with fear, drops his head and says that he'd never even think of looking his way again. Junho stands with his back turned, staring ahead, but looks to the side. One visitor yells that Junho won, and the place erupts in applause. Someone in the crowd says that the newbie just took down 3 players who have 5 years of experience, adding he's gonna spread the word to the press. The crowd starts chanting Junho's name. He presses his lips together, still facing away, wondering how the world has turned into something so strange, where everyone acts like players in some game. A brown-haired woman watches him with a big smile. But Junho thinks that people only care about their own gain these days. They'd even hurt someone if it benefits them, always cheering for the winner, not the one who falls. The bartender points at the teleporter, saying it's ready. Junho considers how there are only 3 ways to survive in this messed up world. Either go as wild as everyone else, shut off all your feelings, or just keep living in constant pain. He steps into the teleporter as it lights him up, thinking about his options. When he looks back, a blue light appears in the dark alley. He says under his breath, missing his friend more than ever. The video cuts to a scene of him stabbing someone with a dagger. In the front seats of a car, men in black suits sit watching the footage. The driver says that the video was filmed at the black market recently and praises Junho's skills, saying he beat 3 level 20 players and even surpassed all expectations. The princess bites into her purple ice cream, looking off in thought. The driver asks what she thinks. She stares out the window for a moment, then smiles, and casually asks for the hero's name again, with her bangs long enough to hide a whole flat-screen TV. The next day, our superstar is barely holding it together as some girl takes a selfie with him, trying to get him to say cheese. He's standing there, all miserable, wondering why he's even putting up with this nonsense. Didn't exactly sign up for this. Meanwhile, the crowd starts complaining, fed up with how long this girl's hogging him. People in line are talking, and Junho finally notices there's this massive line of people, all holding their cameras, waiting for their turn. It hits him like a flashing red alarm. He's not getting home before dark at this rate. Then, out of nowhere, someone calls his name. He looks over and spots this red-haired girl, strolling down the street next to a guy in a sleek black suit, sunglasses coming off in one smooth move. She's asking if she can have a quick chat with him, and he's trying to place who she is. He thinks through a bunch of familiar files, landing on one name only, a big shot member from one of the most powerful guilds, the Big Six. It's her, the so-called princess of the Dokebi Guild, Gong Juha. He pictures her with flames, and a dragon symbol in the background, and it all clicks. She hands him this black and gold business card, making it clear she's not some weirdo. Junho eyes the card, realizing that Dokaibi, of all guilds, actually wants him on board. She then casually asks if they can chat about the job over coffee, if he's cool with it. He decides, why not, and follows her without a second thought, leaving the annoying crowd behind like he never even knew they were there. Not exactly the smoothest exit, but hey, he had to escape somehow. By the time they reach the coffee shop, Gong Juha's there, saying she can't stand the heat, and now she's stuck hiding behind a mask and glasses. Junho thinks to himself, wondering if she wasn't supposed to be a firebender. She just fans herself, sighing about how she actually prefers the cold. The guy in the suit hands her a chocolate milkshake, and Junho remembers how even villains are scared of her. Here she is, looking like any other girl, but he knows he's sitting across from the real princess of the Dokebi Guild. Junho takes the white mug and thanks her. He casually asks what the Dokebi Guild could possibly want from him, nearly spilling his coffee when she drops the bomb. They want him to join. She's totally unfazed, just saying that her boss sent her to hire the player Seo Junho, and she's got zero patience to mess around. She explains she had to see him in action first, and he passed, not surprisingly. Junho, still holding his mug, asks what the criteria were. She's quick to answer, it's all about his achievements. The guy's already made waves, and she's impressed. With an unreadable expression, he listens as she calls him the super rookie. Taking a sip, he has to admit to himself, there really isn't anyone out there with his level of experience right now. Gong Juha adds that his martial arts skills and potential stand out too. Sipping her drink, she even says she heard about his showdown in the market, confirming he's got some serious fighting chops. Then she gets to the main question. Is his top ability really just weapon handling at D rank? He places the cup down, confirming it, since it's right there in his official profile. She laughs, saying he's just full of surprises. She waves her hand, telling him to think it over. He's already crushed it with 1 D rank skill. Imagine the potential if he had access to more. Slapping her palm down on a black folder with a golden emblem, she lets him know that if he joins, he'll get access to skill books and a special route at the main gate for faster development. Junho opens the folder, scanning the perks and benefits, clearly impressed. He thinks about how massive the guild's resources are, not to mention their incentive and pay systems, way better than the associations. As he flips through, it hits him why top players don't stick around in associations. Guilds like Dokebi have it figured out. She flashes the gold guild logo, reminding him that Dokaibi's one of the best out there, and, on top of that, they know more about the second floor than the association does. Gong Juha looks at him, throwing out the question of the day. Wouldn't it make way more sense to join them instead of sticking with the association? She raises her glass, waiting for his answer, but he just stays quiet with a faint smile. She looks at him, a little baffled, because seriously, this is the Dokebi Guild, and she came to him in person. But then, lowering his head, Junho tells her he has to turn down the offer. She waves her hand, insisting he can drop the formal talk now. Suddenly, she's up on her feet, palms slammed on the table, practically yelling, "Why?" Junho imagines a mountain of gold coins, thinking sure, he'd gain money and fame in the guild, but nothing comes free. He pictures the red and black figure of the puppeteer and realizes he'd have to follow every single guild order, no exceptions. Gongjuha and her crew may be useful now, but he can already see it. The guild would end up holding him back someday. Feeling a bit uneasy, she asks if maybe she wasn't clear about something. He reassures her that he gets it. It's an amazing offer. Stroking his chin, he gives her a look and asks if she's ever heard the saying about how it's better to be the head of a snake than the tail of a dragon. She catches on quickly, sighing as she sinks back onto the sofa. It's obvious to her now, he's smart. Even if he joined the guild, he'd have to hustle to climb up the ranks because it's top players competing against each other non-stop. Still seated across from him, she asks one last time if he's serious about refusing, and he apologizes as he stands up to leave. Resigned, she says she can't force him and heads to the window, pulling back the curtain a bit. She advises him to be extra careful from now on. Junho covers his mouth and jokingly asks if she's planning revenge, to which she fires back, offended, saying no and asking if she looks like that type of person. She explains that fiends have been getting bolder lately. Her mind flashes to a figure in a dark hood, adding that the same thing's happening down on the first floor. Junho, looking toward the guild members by the door, asks if they're cooking up some kind of plan. Gongjuha confirms, saying she's sharing this because the association's still in the dark. Looking at her, he realizes she's genuinely concerned that he might run into these fiends unprepared. She ends with a soft smile as he thanks her, giving him a casual wave and saying they'll cross paths again someday. As Junho turns, he hears Gongjuha call him Mr. Snakehead, and someone nearby asks if the fiends have really gotten active. Leaning back on a black sofa, Junho has his hands behind his head, saying that if Dokebi said so, they're probably not bluffing. Across the room, Daogu sits in a black chair, deep in thought, with a hand on his chin, admitting he knew the guilds had extra info, but not this much. Daogu shoots Junho a curious look, asking if he regrets turning down Dokebi's offer, especially since the princess came to him personally. Getting up, Junho says, "Nah, not really. If he was all about money and fame, he'd have accepted, but that stuff just doesn't drive him." He notices Daogu looking a bit disappointed and asks what's up with his expression. Did he actually want him to join them? Daogu shakes his head, saying it's just that the guild might have given him some genuine support. Junho's face clouds over, and he sighs, explaining that a guild would only tie him down. He feels way more at ease sticking with the association. Feeling touched, Daogu covers his mouth, grabbing a stack of papers and saying, in that case, let's renew his contract and even toss in a whole floor for him. Junho asks if he's serious, and as he looks over the contract, Daogu assures him he's got the freedom, especially after refusing an offer from one of the big six. For now, they've got his back. As Junho signs, Daogu promises to work on closing the information gap. Junho finishes with his signature, thanks him, and asks which floor he's moving up to. When Daogu says it's the 77th, Junho agrees, already thinking about packing his stuff. But as he heads to the door, Daogu stops him, and Junho casually says that they should add capturing the East Sea Gate to the schedule for next week. Daogu, surprised, asks why wait so long, wondering if Junho plans to give the fiends extra time. Waving it off, Junho explains that's the whole point, just gotta dangle the bait and wait. He tells him that it's how you catch big fish. Our protagonist is a fisherman too, how proud. The next day, a big blue sign pops up on the screen, announcing that our superstar hero plans to take on the East Sea Gate. The announcer is basically buzzing about how wild this is. If he pulls it off, Korea would be the first country ever without an unconquered gate. Behind the podium, a man in a dark suit shares that the association has renewed its contract with Junho, making their partnership even stronger. In the news studio, 3 people are chatting. One guy asks if it's true that Junho turned down the guild's offer to stick with the association. The guy in white confirms it, saying the association's super rookie is gearing up to capture the East Sea Gate. Just then, a blue flash cuts through the announcer's words about how the entire world is holding its breath. Meanwhile, in a cave, a red-haired dude with what looks like either a tattoo or a burn on his palm stands up. He looks at a narrow river flowing between tall cliffs. Such a good view. Suddenly, a blue flash thingy appeared behind him, showing something on some kind of glowing info window. The dude is surprised to see a picture of a smiling Junho on the news, and the blue spirit beside him tells him that Junho supposedly has the Tempest on his side now. The spirit says that the bow is missing from Tushar's inventory, and the red-haired dude replies that he kept it under wraps. Without even looking back, he says that he also made public the news about a fiend taking out a rising star in India, so he's definitely keeping his guard up. A question pops up. Should he head down to the first floor? He says no way, no evidence to support it, and they can't afford to bump into the association, especially now. The guy's eye lights up red as he asks if there's anyone else on the first floor they could use. The Blue Spirit answers that the Shadow Brothers are still down there, and they plan to use them in an auction in Las Vegas soon. They really stand out among those hungry for power. Standing on the cliff, the evil dude declares that he'll enter the East Sea Gate with them, whether Jun-ho ends up dead or alive. Suddenly turning in shock, he focuses on one of the cliffs nearby, where some kind of noise catches his attention. Looking at it with his Sharingan, he turns away, telling the spirit that it's the Sword Saint. He orders the fading blue glowy thingy to get ready to move. He stands there, thinking about how this is the Blade of Wrath from Kim Woo-jong of the Nine Heavens gang. Even as a top-notch archer, he knows he can't take it on as he doesn't have the reach. His red eyes blaze as he realizes that because of it, he can't just stroll down to the first floor and grab the Tempest for himself. It feels like a mocking challenge. Cal Signer declares that he'll keep a close eye on Junho's luck, how long it lasts to be exact. Meanwhile, Junho is working out as he looks at the information window, wondering if he's taken the bait. He's on the mat, exercising, and the thought of the American players, the Shadow Brothers, getting involved in capturing the East Sea Gate feels too suspicious. Standing up, he remembers asking Cha Si-yoon to dig up everything she could about those dudes. He tilts his head back, feeling the energy flow through him, with some kind of purple glow in his eyes. Bright purple-black rays swirl around him, power rising like he's going Super Saiyan. Junho stands in the center of this purple-black vortex, realizing he needs to get a handle on using magic. Even though he feels energy drained and a bit reckless, Skaya has shown him a method to maximize results. He looks at the magic aura, brushing his fingers through it, feeling a warm welcome from the magic. It was saying hi like a friendly puppy. His expression turns serious. He knows he won't be able to use the Watchguard of Darkness skill in the Eastern Sea Gate. He says that just judging by the name, it's most likely that first-class monsters will resemble dragons. He thinks of how dragons are among the most powerful of first-class monsters. The player studies the blue information window, which states that to capture the gate, he needs to eliminate the nameless dragon. He realizes that beginners wouldn't be able to leave a scratch on such a formidable beast. He recalls standing before a red dragon with his sword, remembering his past attempts to defeat them. Without the ability to fly, taking them down is kinda like Saitama fighting an aerial battle. Standing in front of the glowing window, he thinks he could either try to grab the dragon's scales and fight while mounted, or bring it down to the ground. He looks at the information window and observes as a message from Cha Si-yoon pops up on his phone. She's sending over the materials he requested about the Shadow Brothers, along with a file. Junho thinks to himself that she's certainly quick on the draw. Looking at his phone, Junho reads that the Shadow Brothers are a duo of American players named Vincent and Edvar. He imagines their cloaked figures, veterans with over 200 successful missions under their belts, trusted to protect VIPs. It's unusual for both brothers to have developed shadow skills. In his mind, he thinks of multiple video cameras capturing their interview responses back home, where they're asked why they want to join the capture of the East Sea Gate. He watches an interview where the two fiend brother dudes stand behind a podium, with one sporting short hair and the other long. When asked if they're confident in their victory, the short-haired brother replies that they're merely showing respect to Junho. The long-haired brother adds that they're thrilled to help someone who has succeeded in the most impossible places by capturing Korea's last unconquered gate. Junho smiles, wondering if he can take advantage of their confidence. The next day, which is the day of the expedition, Deok-gu looks at the journalists, saying that both Korean and foreign reporters have gathered, their focus fixed on the gate capture. He's very nervous. He touches his chest and asks if Junho is nervous too. Junho replies that he actually is, causing Deok-gu to freak out like a madman. The protagonist holds up his phone, saying that these crappy games would put you at the edge of your seat. Deok-gu reminds him to ditch the phone, irritated that he's still using it. He tosses a roll of paper at the protagonist, questioning why he's so carefree, especially since the gate is worth more than 500 onlookers. Junho responds that it's not that he's unconcerned, he just doesn't feel the hype. Sitting back in his chair, he says that he defeated the Frost Queen herself, so why should he fret about some nameless dragon? Deok-gu says that it makes sense, but reminds him he won't be going in alone today. Suddenly, a man's leg pops out from the car, followed by the Shadow Brothers as they step out. Junho sees that since only 3 of them are participating in the capture, there's a good chance they might collaborate with fiends. Judging by their profiles, they're kinda strong, and he worries they could attack him from behind. The president looks out the window at the reporters crowding the car, expressing his bad feeling about the whole situation. He'd gladly cancel the gate capture performance. Looking at Deokgu, Junho reassures him not to worry. Even if they try to pull a fast one, he's got a plan. The two men greet the protagonist with a smile you definitely can't trust. One of them holds out his hand, saying they're fans of his. Junho shakes his hand, and the other dude says that he's heard Junho manage to capture 2 gates. The shorter man adds, saying that it's amazing, especially with his slim build. Junho answers in English, saying that there's nothing special about it. Cameras flash around them as one of the men scratches his head, surprised to hear Junho speaking English. Junho explains he's got a friend from England. The two men share a look, and the long-haired one says, in that case, they won't need to worry about any translation issues. He admits he was concerned the capture could get messy if they had to rely on Vita's translating device. The two smile at the protagonist, saying these are Korea's last uncaptured gates, and that they're ready to give it their all. Junho replies not to worry because he's prepared for this. Meanwhile, Deokgu watches everything from the car, looking serious. One of the reporters explains to the audience that players from both countries are here to work together, and, if successful, Korea will become the safest zone in the world. The three stand before the gate. A voiceover announces that the entrance to the gate is the most intense moment since players don't yet know what awaits them inside. What monsters? What conditions? Junho enters the gate with a hard look, brows furrowed. The voiceover notes that this is when the player's emotions are at their highest. The long-haired man follows, looking determined. The voice adds that, with the tension of battle ahead, they often miss attacks from behind. The long-haired man suddenly creates a red blast in his hand, saying this is the moment to strike. The short-haired guy, surprised, calls his name, looking alarmed. Edvar, eyes on the gate, tells Vincent to hold on. Junho's dark figure seems to radiate a strange aura as he looks back. Edvar stares straight ahead, confused and a little nervous. The guys find themselves marooned in the middle of a sandy beach. Vincent looks up at the bright blue sky while Edvar, looking annoyed and red-faced, stares down, whispering to himself about the chance they missed. Out in the ocean, a tiny island covered in trees pops up, birds swooping around it. Edvar eyes his teammate next to him and talks about how they missed their move, saying they'll have to wait until they're deep in battle. They trek through the sand, taking in the scenery. Edvar admits the fresh beach view is pretty surprising for a gate. It's like they're on a vacation instead of in a danger zone. Vincent, looking around too, wonders aloud where this mystery dragon is since there's not a single monster in sight. Junho is striding ahead of them, totally focused and not looking back. One of the guys cups his hands around his mouth and shouts, saying something feels off, especially since this boss doesn't even have a name. Ahead, the Scarlet First-Class Gate gives off a fierce, pulsing energy. Suddenly, a huge shadow sweeps over the three of them, and the wind kicks sand up everywhere. The guys freeze, turning pale, and exchange worried looks. Junho stares forward, while Vincent lifts his hand to block the sun, trying to make out what exactly that thing is. Then, they spot it. A massive dragon's mouth with razor-sharp fangs appears, hanging in the sky. The giant creature moves across the blue, glaring down at them with blazing eyes, and they see their reflections in its stare. It wriggles and twists as it glides across the sky, and the guys stare up in shock. Edvar asks if this is really the nameless dragon. They keep staring, and the long-haired dude says that at least now they know where it's hiding, while Vincent stands frozen, totally surprised by its size. Edvar side-eyes Junho, asking how in the world they're supposed to take this thing down. They look around to where he was standing, only to find he's vanished. Both of them gape, shouting insults, wondering when he even managed to slip away. Edvar looks forward, totally confused, saying he hadn't even seen the protagonist leave. The dragon's shadow covers the two of them as they nervously look back. The sky darkens with clouds like some boss fight, and the dragon is chilling up there above, with its fiery eyes fixed on them while they stare back, stunned. Then, a system message pops up saying they're facing a forgotten dragon. The dragon rises up, charging the air with electricity before blasting lightning down at the guys. They scatter, sprinting for cover as bolts crackle around them. Junho is casually chilling on a tree branch, watching the chaos below, leaning back and asking how long they've been cozying up with fiends. Meanwhile, the dragon's strikes keep raining down, forcing Edvar to throw a quick curse to the side. He plants his feet, spreading his arms wide, and summons shadow soldiers to back him up, shouting to his brother to go track down Junho while he keeps the dragon busy. Vincent hesitates, but Edvar just gives him a hard look, reminding him who he's talking to and ordering him to bring Junho over as soon as possible. The dragon floats above them, circling, ready to dive again. Vincent then runs off into the trees while Edvar sticks around, taunting the dragon by calling it a worm and daring it to strike. The fiend runs through the sand and trees, thinking about their past screw-ups, worrying that if this goes down like that mess back in Vegas, they're toast. Then he sees something out of that's kind of like a faint glow. Junho's aura practically lights up the trees ahead, not even hidden. Vincent snorts, figuring this guy doesn't even know how to mask his own magic. Gripping his weapon tight, he marches toward the dark energy, saying that Edvar's already fighting, and they need this guy on board. Swinging his weapon with an annoyed look, he calls out to the aura, ordering it to stop playing hard to get and come along. But then he pauses, confused as he realizes the aura's shape has changed. It's not Junho, but some strange dark energy, shifting like shadows deep in the trees. Vincent stops in his tracks, thinking this feels like his own shadow territory, almost like he's wandered into something he shouldn't have. Vincent's standing there, deep in thought like something's off. He's all tense, saying his magical vibe was clear as day a second ago. But now? Nothing. Just as he's trying to make sense of it, the protagonist casually pops up behind him, making Vincent jump. Junho's watching, and yeah, he's pretty sure now, they're fiends, no doubt. Vincent throws a suspicious side-eye as the young guy hops down from a tree, landing nearby, hands shoved in his pockets like he's got all the time in the world. Vincent asks what he means by that, and the protagonist, dripping with sarcasm, asks if he needs to spell it out. They're fiends, so why fake it? Vincent just holds up his hand, brushing it off like it's nonsense, saying, hey, he only went after him because the kid betrayed them first. But Junho's not buying it, eyeing him, thinking, this guy's a smooth talker, but it's all cheap talk too. Then Junho points out he might want to cover those red eyes up because, yeah, fiends have crimson eyes, it's kinda a giveaway. Vincent panics, slapping his hand over his face, stressing over how no one's ever caught on to him before. Straightening up, he keeps his hand glued to his face, while Junho watches and calls him out, adding that he can't control the herd with just a look. Vincent takes a bold step forward with his dagger in hand and taunts him for being too fearless. He drops the sword's handle, throwing a taunt about how the guy should be shaking in terror by now. Green energy pulses from his sword as he smiles like a madman crazy person, dreaming about becoming a true fiend by taking one down and drinking its blood. He's obsessed with this power, hyping it up like it's the ultimate high. Vincent's ready to throw down. He says he'll start by wiping out Junho's legs. He fires off the projectiles, aiming right at him, but Junho's just standing there, head down like he's in his own world. At the last second, he looks up, activating Night Step, dodging as the projectiles go straight through. Vincent's clueless about what just happened, and Junho's aura swirls around him, leaving Vincent totally confused about where he went. The protagonist sneaks up behind Vincent, catching him off guard. Vincent takes a swing with his sword, but the young guy's aura swirls all around him, filling the air with streams of dark energy. Junho casually says that after mastering one skill, he's picked up a few new tricks. Vincent, looking around nervously, realizes he's now surrounded by this thick, dark energy. Junho's curious, already wondering what the next level might bring. Up in the sky, the dragon's still there, while shadow soldiers try and fail to take it down. Edvar watches helplessly, thinking there's not much he can do if the monster won't come closer. He catches movement in the trees. It's a scowling Vincent charging out and calling his brother's name. Edvar raises a brow, hand on his hip, as he questions why Vincent's alone and where Junho went. Vincent yells that Junho's figured out they're fiends. He even used devil energy but couldn't sense Junho's power because the guy somehow masked it. Edvar, confused, raises his hand to stop Vincent's rambling and asks how he let Junho slip away. If he's so sharp, how'd he miss him? Vincent just throws his hands up in frustration, mumbling that the guy's tricks worked because they got separated. After calming down, the brothers look up at the sky. Edvar suggests they work together, he'll distract the dragon, and Vincent should be ready to strike when it comes close. The dragon writhes overhead, taunting them. Edvar asks if Vincent's got enough strength for this, and Vincent admits it's tricky since they're stuck on the ground. Vincent remembers a rumor about dragons having a weak spot called the reverse scale, a single scale flipped in the opposite direction. With his shadow movement technique, he plans to get closer. But before they can make a move, the dragon prepares to shoot, aiming right for them. Edvar starts to panic, yelling at Vincent to dodge as the monster's attacks hurtle straight at them, forcing the brothers to scatter. The shadow soldiers vanish, leaving Edvar coughing up blood he tries to hide with his hand. He curses under his breath, realizing that the dragon's attack backfired on him directly. Vincent looks back to see his brother kneeling, clearly struggling, and calls out to him. With a fierce look, Edvar's eyes go crimson as he raises his hand, telling Vincent not to worry and to just stick to the plan, and he agrees. He raises his hand, now with his eyes red, and channels his power, hurling a green beam straight at the dragon. The attack hits, with smoke all around from the impact. The dragon's massive mouth opens as the two men stare up, saying that while they aimed for its eye, they at least got it to come down a bit. Using his shadow movement, Vincent makes 3 quick dashes and lands right on the dragon's back. Balancing himself, he scans for the weak spot and notices a single scale out of place, the reverse scale. He leaps forward, holding onto it with all his might, then yanks it off, feeling like he did something there, poor fiend. Suddenly, tiny sparks of lightning start coming out from the exposed area. Vincent freezes, as he gets shocked more than a malfunctioning toaster. Edvar watches the electric chaos unfold, shouting his brother's name in alarm. Off to the side, Junho stands casually on a tree branch, watching the whole comedy show. He shakes his head, calling them idiots. Edvar stares at the dragon, practically shouting as some dark goo drips behind him. Out of nowhere, his buddy takes a hit, and blood's just pouring out. The guy stumbles back, and Vincent tells Edvar they've messed up big time. Edvar's brother asks him what he means by that. Right then, the dragon's mouth opens, ready to throw down. Another guy's hiding in the bushes, just watching, all chill, and thinking how they just went straight for the dragon's weak spot, the reverse scale, without a second thought. Meanwhile, the dragon's gearing up for round 2. The guy in the bushes knows rookies always think that poking the dragon's weak spot is a genius move. But if they mess up, the dragon will flip, and that usually means a very rough day for the poor souls who poked it. The dragon's back to throwing attacks. The guy's friend is dodging like his life depends on it, which it does, and our onlooker figures normal weapons just won't cut it anymore. So, he whips out a bow, figuring it's time to make the most of this chaos. He pulls the bowstring, thinking how they still need to drag this fight out a bit longer. He's getting a kick out of this, saying he just wants some peace to pull the string back. Vincent barely dodges another dragon strike, and his brother shoots him a look, telling him to quit talking and focus. The dragon's attacks slam into the ground, sending dust everywhere. One of the men's starting to lose his cool, wondering when this chaos will stop. With new attacks forming around them, he's pale, realizing this dragon's got endless tricks. Fear sinks in, and he knows he messed up. Then, Junho fires an arrow, and everyone watches as it lands square on the dragon's head. Blood rushes from its eye, and the dragon flaps off, looking a little worse for wear. The guys exchange a shocked look, totally baffled by the protagonist's shot. Edvar sees that the protagonist wasn't just saving them for nothing, but he's got zero chance against this thing solo. The protagonist stands calmly, and one of the men's thinking that only the 3 of them together could ever finish this beast off. He looks at his brother, saying that with the dragon distracted by Junho, they should grab this chance. The dragon pulls back a bit, and one of the men yells that it's charging again. They've just got to hang on a bit longer. The protagonist watches the men trying to dodge. He notices their dodging's improved. They're not even bothering to attack, just running for dear life. Relaxing a bit, he says that the guys are probably trying to steer the dragon's wrath toward him. And then, almost with an apology, he pulls back his bowstring again, saying something about the bright future they wanted to chase. It's more of a mirage than an oasis, and dark energy starts swirling near the bow. The protagonist holds the bowstring tight, streams of energy swirling around his face. Suddenly, a dark arrow forms in his grip, surrounded by glowing mana. He lets the arrow fly at the dragon, creating a new one immediately after. The arrow shoots off so fast, the air spins into a mini whirlwind. The bow starts to glow in his hands, and he's already claiming victory over the dragon, throwing a look at the retreating guys and figuring it's time to chase down a hound. Edvar's got this annoyed look, saying bad stuff and talking slick about the protagonist, while his brother dodges another hit, wondering why Junho suddenly paused. The hero leans his head on his hand, smiling at the men like he's waiting for them to put on a show. He crouches down in front of them, joking that it looks less like a dragon hunt and more like a shooting game. Pointing a finger, he's basically mocking them, while the guys yell back, calling him out for staying safe in the back. The long-haired one says about him sitting pretty, but the protagonist says that's exactly why he's held off. Then they look up to an empty sky in confusion. But suddenly, the kid's arrows rain down, hitting the dragon and dragging it to the ground, pinning its massive body to the sand. Magic arrows keep slamming into it, and the dragon lets out a loud, painful scream. The guys watch the fallen monster in disbelief, realizing the kid actually took it down while they couldn't even get close. And, according to what they'd heard, the kid's supposed to be more of a swordsman than an archer. The dragon's body now looks like a pincushion, arrows sticking out all over. They're left wondering if it's finally over. Still holding the bow, the boy talks to himself about how amazing it is, saying Cal Signer's probably crying about missing out. The men share an awkward look, trying to take some credit for the dragon, mumbling about how they totally helped finish it off, and that they're clearly not the losers they seemed. But then the bow disappears from the kid's hands. The men quickly try to bargain, offering up all the details on Cal Signer in exchange for a little mercy. But the kid just scowls, telling them to zip it and making it clear he has no plans to team up with them. The guys tense up, and the kids thinking how clueless they are if they really believe he'll let them walk away knowing what they do. Vincent's looking ticked off, a vein popping on his forehead, saying there's no way they're going down like this. Then Vincent jumps forward, summoning a magical weapon. The kid frowns, barely reacting, and with one swift move, slices Vincent's hand clean off. Vincent stares in shock, totally lost on how the kid moved so fast. Edvar throws a hand out, shouting his brother's name, tears building up as he grabs his own weapon and calls the boy every name in the book. But the kid slaps his hand aside, blocking him and driving his blade right into Edvar. Edvar's head drops to the boy's shoulder, blood spilling from his mouth as he gasps, barely able to process what's happened. The kid, looking calm as ever, tells him that if guys like them somehow get a next life, they'd better spend it repenting for all they've done. The evil dude drops to the ground in front of the protagonist, lifeless. Jun-ho looks over at the dragon, lying there, quietly dying slowly in pain. He quickly approaches the dragon and raises his sword high. Energy swirls around the blade, charging it up. The dragon stares back at him with this odd look, and Jun-ho wonders what's up with it. He brings the blade down, finishing the dragon off. The dragon's eyes close for the last time, and as if in response, the clouds over the island start clearing. The system pops up a notification, announcing that he's now conquered the island of the Forgotten Dragon. Notifications pop up, telling him he's leveled up twice and earned a hefty pile of dragon bones as a reward. He decides to deal with all of that later. Standing over the man's body, he thinks it's finally time to test out the new skill he picked up. He pictures a human skull with an eerie aura around it, ready to activate the ability he got from clearing the gate of the Curse of Dawn. He reaches down to Vincent's head, knowing this skill can replay the memories of the dead. Putting his hand over the corpse, he tells the dead man it's time to confess. As he activates the skill, light starts to gather around his hand, illuminating a faint screen. It's almost like watching a movie with some handy extra options and features. He orders it to show the freshest memories. In the memory, he suddenly finds himself watching Vincent stand over a man sitting on the ground, crying, balding, and holding his hands up defensively. The guy watches as Vincent coldly ends the man's life despite how much he was begging. The memories flash through murder, violence, endless screams, and despair, which makes the protagonist feel kinda uncomfortable and shuts down the skill, thinking he's gone too deep. Guess even the toughest people can't handle horror movies. Taking a deep breath, he focuses again, this time narrowing it down to memories connected to the Fiend Association. Images start up, showing Edvar pulling up the shutters in Jim Cleaner's store. He sees this dude inside, ironing with a lot of steam flowing around like a sauna. He looks at Edvar very eerily, instructing him to join a newcomer from the Korean Players Association, who's planning to take over the gate of the East Sea, and telling him that it's an order. Edvar looks confused, saying they're already gearing up for a big auction in Vegas. The man replies that he's just a messenger, and there's nothing else he can tell him. Jun-ho rewinds through the memories, figuring this was the moment when the Shadow Brothers got their orders. He catches the name of the place and thinks it's likely one of the Fiend Association's hidden meeting spots. The system window says that he might uncover more if he keeps digging. Suddenly, dark energy pulses in front of him, and a man in a sleek light suit appears in front of the brothers, complimenting them on the look in their eyes, and is also quite happy that they're broers. The guy declares that he'll turn the brothers into second-grade items, and they are now promoted to the second level in their ranks. The man filled with evil aura lifts his hand, promising to share his strength with them. Jun-ho quickly stops and grabs his head in shock, almost stumbling as the system announces that he can't fully see the memories due to his lower skill level. He tries to make sense of what just happened, but the system cuts him off, saying it's for his own safety. Frustrated, he looks up at the system window, realizing this man is some top-level fiend above the brothers. He'd need to level up his skill if he wants to see it all. Then something clicks. He looks back to the dragon, realizing he can replay memories from more than just human beings. The skill doesn't discriminate. Everyone can get it. He raises a hand toward the dragon, thinking about how this creature, way stronger than the Cinder Fox, didn't even have a real name. Sad. The dragon lies still, eyes closed, and our hero feels it's time to dive in. A glowing aura starts to rise from the dragon, and he asks the creature who it really was. In the dragon's memories, he sees a shadowy figure of an old man with a bald head, talking about a years-long war between three countries. The old man wonders if anyone has asked the dragon's king for peace, saying people longed for a life without conflict. The dragon just looks away, thinking that peaceful life is something he never really knew. The shadowed figure of the dragon appears like a crowned human, like some kind of king, stating that this war is far from over. The protagonist stares in shock as the dragon remembers how the Great Northern Republic, which is known as China today, was still lying in wait, ready to snatch away their lands, so peace wasn't an option. Then the figure, this majesty, raises his hand, starts saying something about his body before he gets cut off because he eventually starts coughing. The person he's with calls him Beopsa, which is a title meaning Buddhist priest, and the emperor notices blood on his hand, looking over at the nearby monk, asking if he's heard the legend of Shin Ryong, the sacred dragon that defends the Great Republic. The emperor places a hand on a railing to support himself, and the monk replies, asking him if it isn't just a superstition, but the monarch tells him what he thinks. He says that if there really is a dragon safeguarding the kingdom, then his people deserve a sacred dragon as well. The man stares off into the distance, telling him that when he's gone, he should cremate his body and scatter his ashes over the eastern sea. His big plan is to apparently come back as a dragon and protect the land. The monk questions him, asking if he's really ditching the whole reincarnation thing and taking on this big dragon gig. The emperor starts on how he's way past his prime anyway, and should come back someday as a mystic animal. The hero wraps up his memory skill, then stares at the dragon's body, seeing that this guy was human once, and maybe even the one who wanted to be a dragon. The dragon's just lying there with its mouth open, looking like it's dozing off. The young man figures that this must be Munmu, the king of Sela. A couple of notifications pop up, and he realizes he's just taken down some ancestor. He drops to his knees, clasps his hands together, and throws up a quick prayer, telling the dragon it can chill now since the place is safe. Then, something wild happens. The dragon's scales start glowing, floating up and forming this bright dragon shape. The dragon spirit thanks him for praying for him. Apparently, it's big in Korean culture to pray for ancestors, showing respect, keeping their memory alive, all that good stuff. Nobody else even remembered this old dragon dude, but here he is, pulling out the respectful moves. The system then pops up with a final message. He's completed the hidden quest of the Island of the Forgotten Dragon. His reward is the Flute of Tidal Breath and the shiny title of Helper of Ascension. The guy reads the system notification, wondering what kind of hidden quest this is now. The system fills him in, saying the Flute of Tidal Breath he got is one powerful item that lets him unlock some rare abilities, but he can only use it 3 times. That sounds like good news, and he's thinking he really hit the jackpot this time. Relaxing, he throws an arm behind his head, admiring the sunset, saying to himself about how this surprise is actually kinda nice. But then he's back at a packed conference, crowds of people buzzing around after the big gate capture. 2 guys near him are chatting, one saying that Junho made it out solo. The other guy frowns, asking if the Shadow Brothers are gone for good. In the press row, reporters are whispering in disbelief. One of them says he'd never in a million years thought the Shadow Brothers would get taken down. But another one reminds him that death doesn't make exceptions, except maybe Goku, who comes back a couple times. Junho steps up to the mic with a serious look on his face. As he starts talking, everyone's leaning forward listening, and then, boom, tears start rolling down his cheeks. He goes on, blaming himself, saying he came out alone because of something he couldn't stop. He explains, saying they got separated inside a maze, each starting far away from each other. While wiping his tears, Junho goes on about how he found the Shadow Brothers, and sadly, it was too late. They'd been taken out by the nameless dragon, and he couldn't shake the thought that if he'd just been faster, he might have saved them. Elsewhere, some really evil-looking dude watches Junho's speech. He says something mocking, practically jealous of Junho's luck. His assistant stands nearby, looking a bit uneasy as the guy asks how the big Vegas auction's going to pan out now. Calcigner admits that sending the Shadow Brothers into the gate had been his call. Calcigner frowns. He says he has to prepare to make the first move no matter what. He orders the watchdogs to be held on the 2nd floor for backup, not wanting to risk anything right now. His assistant hesitates, reminding him that upper management had insisted, but he waves it off, focused only on getting the results he needs. For him, success is everything, no matter what lines they cross or how many times they take a hit. The guy's all serious, saying the Fiend Association's got one rule: results are king, and who cares how messy things get as long as they pull off a solid auction. His sidekick agrees. He says he'd probably get beaten up by something for doing this, but that's still better than not delivering and getting his head chopped off for messing up. He's putting the watchdog in charge of the Las Vegas auction, and this time he's dead set that nothing's going sideways. Meanwhile, Junho's sitting at his desk, surrounded by stacks of papers that make him look like some overworked Hokage from the village, dead serious. He calls his secretary over, and she stands there all polite, hands folded, smiling like it's no big deal. He asks why in the world she didn't arrange the personal commission requests herself this time. She says she already did, motioning to the mountain on the table like it's a masterpiece. He leans back, asking if they're all personal commission requests then. She tells him yes, as it's a result of clearing the Eastern Sea Gate. He gets flustered because he wasn't exactly carrying the whole operation here. He barely did anything. She tells him that the reports say otherwise, but for players, even luck is a skill. Junho frowns, giving her an annoyed look, but she takes a step back, looking him up and down, and then suggests his hair needs a little fixing up. Junho asks why, he's no celebrity superstar, but she waves him off, saying she checked the photos from yesterday's conference, and honestly, they looked rough. She even pulls up the top player profiles on her watch screen, showing him the pics of the guys she says don't even have his level of success, but at least they don't look shabby. Look how she massacred my boy. She pulls out a card from her wallet and slaps it on the table, saying he needs a trim ASAP, recommending a fancy salon like she's doing him a huge favor. Junho stares at the card, then at her, kinda missing the days when he could just throw on a mask and call it a day. But she sees it like, okay, that's settled. He sighs and tells her she's free to go for the day, adding that she put in a lot of work with the whole paper mountain. She flashes the happiest smile, like she just won a day off from school, and skips out the door, giving him a quick bow and a cheerful goodbye. He watches her leave, catching her final reminder to go get that haircut, and he feels a little thrown by just how pumped she looks. He grabs a lock of his hair, holding it up like, is it really that bad? Later on, as it gets dark, he realizes, okay, maybe it is time to chop some of it off. Walking down the street, he thinks about the fancy salon she suggested, but really, he'd prefer the old days, back in his Spectre phase, when he could just stroll into any random spot for a trim. He remembers those days with the mask. Nobody looked at him twice back then, and any place worked just fine. Now though? His face is plastered up on some huge screen over the building. Things have definitely changed. Looking at a gallery sign up ahead, he decides it might be nice to just chill for a bit. He steps inside, but there's nobody around. He takes his mask off and grabs a book off a shelf, wondering if this place is doing all right or if it's about to go under. As he walks down with a couple of books, he thinks maybe he'll order ramen in a minute. But then, something catches his eye. His secretary a few tables over, halfway through a bowl of ramen noodles while she reads. She seems super into that book, saying stuff about how it's almost too much, like some drama straight out of a novel. The protagonist walks up to her, and she looks up. She freezes and does a spit take, staring at him pale like she's just seen a ghost. Junho sits there holding a book, eyes straight ahead. Across from him, Cha Si-eun's doing the same, with her own book in hand. He casually tells her to watch all she wants. He's not going anywhere. Si-eun isn't thrilled, and she slams her book on the table, clearly annoyed. She gives him a look and insists that there's nothing wrong with reading whatever books an adult likes. Even back in ancient times, they thought books had the whole world in them. Junho shifts a bit and comments that it's a nice thought, but he's not sold on it. His own book's spine reads, SSS class Munchkin who trained for 9,009,000 years, and he admits that he doubts this one's got the whole world inside. Si-eun, looking miffed, practically yells, asking what on earth Mr. Junho is reading to make him so confident. He shows her the cover, a bulky multi-volume novel called Priest of the Sun, and thinks to himself that his pick isn't much better either. Si-eun eyes him, catching that they're both reading equally wild stories, and demands to see his title. Junho covers his face with the book, which only makes her realize it's just like hers. He casually stretches, massaging his arms, and says he's actually finding it pretty entertaining. Then he watches as she closes her book shut, and he asks if she's finished it too. She replies with a casual smile that it was definitely interesting. Junho smiles a bit, noting how unexpected that is. She explains that she came to rent comic books, and Junho, looking around at the room filled with shelves, thinks it's surprising to find her in a place like this, given her background. Si-eun lowers her eyes and says it's a pretty common assumption. Resting her hands on the book, she explains that she actually enjoys the quiet, where she can read without anyone around. Waving her hand a bit, she adds that she loves the rustling sound of turning pages, which is why she prefers paper books over ebooks. Junho casually says that she probably likes the smell too. Si-eun lifts the book closer, admitting there's something about the smell of old books. It's like you can smell the time sealed inside them. Just then, her wristwatch lights up. She stands up, saying she didn't realize how quickly time flew by and that she needs to head out. Junho, ever polite, asks if she needs a taxi as she walks toward the exit. She waves him off, saying her place is nearby. Junho gives her a wave as well, seeing it as they'll meet again tomorrow morning. He notices how hard she works, almost like a bee, and he decides he needs to keep up. Meanwhile, over at the association tower, Deok-gu brings up a random question, asking if Junho's planning to go to the Shadow Brothers' funeral. Junho, sitting on the couch, wonders what Deok-gu is even doing here, and Deok-gu just wonders why he'd bother with that funeral. Junho shifts, saying he got the fiend's secret meetup spot from the Shadow Brothers, and Deok-gu's surprised. He asks where it is, and Junho's like, it's a secret, for now. He's got to check it out himself. Deok-gu, sitting down, looks worried, which Junho picks up on. Deok-gu waves him off, saying it's just about the fiends. They need intel from them, but he's worried Junho's just going to wipe them out. Junho promises he'll get what they need, picturing the small fry fiend he's after and thinking he's bound to know something. Deok-gu agrees to trust him, saying he'll be around if Junho needs backup. Then, Junho pulls up his inventory window and drops a ton of bones on the table. Deok-gu stares, picking one up and asking who on earth these bones belong to. Junho explains they're from a dragon at the East Sea Gate, and he's free to use half of them however he wants. Then he points to a swordsmith in his mind, telling Deok-gu to ask Kwan Noya to make him a new sword out of the rest. Deok-gu taps his watch, agreeing to reach out to Noya and double-checking if Junho has any specific requests for the sword, like length or weight. Junho heads for the door, casually saying he just wants it like his old sword. As he's leaving, Deok-gu shakes his head, thinking about how the old man's 100th birthday is the day after tomorrow. Junho stops, asking Deok-gu to remind Noya that if he forgets his age, maybe it's time to retire. Finally, back in his room, Junho flops onto his bed, fingers tapping his watch. A chat screen pops up, and he's messaging someone about changing her tickets to Las Vegas for tomorrow. In response, a little cat emoji waves its paw at him on the screen. That was satisfying to see. Junho checks the message, then pops open his inventory window, deciding to take a look. He pulls out one special item, the Flute of Tidal Breath, a serious piece of magic that could pretty much bring world peace in the right hands. The info screen shows it only has 3 uses, with all 3 still available. He thinks about how, even though it has limited uses, it's still a crazy powerful artifact, and he holds the glowing flute, feeling its energy in his grip. He checks out his own stats window, showing level 20, various boosted abilities, and a decent magic stat that's now at its peak. With a mix of pride and relief, he claps his hands, feeling like he's getting somewhere. He's a bit teary-eyed too, realizing his magic stats topped out. He's excited, knowing that at this pace, he might soon get to wield Sword Steel, a skill that calls for high magic. In his mind, he pictures a dark blade glowing with a purple aura. Using Sword Steel takes serious magic control, and he feels like he's almost there. Lying on the bed, staring at his info screen, he figures he's probably ready to hunt on the 2nd floor now. He imagines what it'll be like to master Sword Steel, to keep leveling up and eventually reach the 3rd floor. In his mind's eye, he sees dark, shadowy figures and wonders if he'd be strong enough to face off against the 9 legendary lords from another world. Sitting up, he wonders just how powerful those creatures could have become over the past 25 years. Out the window, he spots a plane flying under the full moon. Watching it, he considers the fiends still around, wondering how many are left. In the end, he says that he's excited. Over in Las Vegas, where gambling and pleasure exists 24/7, hence its nickname, the City of Sin, Junho pulled up to a casino. It had taken so long to get there, and his whole body hurts from sitting down. He feels bummed, thinking that if Skaya were there, she would solve everything with teleportation. He misses his teleportation device, friend, so much. Looking around at the crowd, he noticed people looking up. So he looks up to see if it's a ghost or something, or if the sky is falling. Apparently, there is a round hologram advertising an artifact auction. Now he understands why there are so many people on the street. The auction is attracting famous celebs from all over the world. Junho says that he apparently isn't interested in the auction. He opens his map and realizes that his destination is farther than he thought, so he decides he needs to sort things out quickly and then get some good rest. Later on, over at Jim's Cleaners, inside the laundry, a dude in a black t-shirt angrily slams a remote on the table, shouting about when the repairman would come. Sitting next to him, another guy listens as he vents that everything is going very badly. The Shadow Brothers had messed things up, and the air conditioner is broken. The dude goes further to lament about the watchdogs, saying that this means that he would have to meet them again, calling them bastards. The other guy asks if he's met them before, and he responded yes. He adds that he heard they hadn't smelled blood in a long time, and they had killed his boss. The door opened and a bunch of dangerous people walk in, consisting of a hot girl chewing gum and a skinny dude in a red bandana that looks straight out of a Suicide Squad movie. The man in black gets freaked out, fearfully greeting the squad of watchdogs. The girl looks at him with displeasure. She asks why it was so hot. Did he want to die? They begin bowing and apologizing, and she demands they at least bring her the orders. She snatches a paper from the man's hands, examining the document with annoyance. Her comrade is surprised to hear the mission could really be changed. She hands the document to the dude, who asks if the ascent to the second floor was in the flight and offers to check it himself. The dude studies the document for a while. After that, the girl asks their boss if they could file an official complaint to them. Moreover, they ordered them to steal Huge. She notes that Cal Signer isn't even their immediate superior. Their boss stands in the doorway with enough aura to burn the place, looking at them before extending his hand to the dude. The Suicide Squad cast reject straightens out the crumpled paper and hands it to the boss. The boss takes the document and decides his aura would only burn the piece of paper for now. The bald, dark-skinned man looks at the two dudes and asks if there were any more orders, to which the men say no. The boss turns and tells his team it's time to go, slamming the door of the laundry room shut. The man in the black t-shirt falls to the floor, completely freaked out by the horror show he had just witnessed. His friend crouches down beside him, asking if he was okay, and asking if those were really the infamous watchdogs. He adds that despite the fact that they did look scary, their leader seemed normal. The man asks him if he's blind. His friend asks why he is taking it out on him. The man asks him if he's blind and says that he would only say it once, so he should listen carefully. He tells him that people call the 9 strongest players in this world the 9 heavens. The leader of the watchdogs, Arma, is a student of one of them who also held a high rank in the Fiend Association. He was a disciple of Nazad Hello. The other dude recognizes Arma as the psycho who committed mass murder in Turkey 6 months ago, who was also a skeleton summoner. He had heard that at first, the squad of watchdogs consisted of 5 people, but Arma didn't like 2 of them, so he turned them into skeletons. The younger one screams in fear. Just then, the protagonist pulls up looking like a repairman. They start asking him if he is there to repair the air conditioner, and yell at him for being late. He looks around and says that it was dangerously hot. Oh, he's gonna fix the damn air conditioner all right. A snowflake appears above Junho's palm as he offers to help. The men look up in surprise, delighted by the refreshing snowflakes that floated through the air. But shortly after, they begin shaking and rubbing their bodies, asking him to stop, saying it was too cold. Politely, they request for him to cease his magic. Junho touches the peak of his cap with a smile, saying he couldn't. He isn't joking. He takes off his cap and smiles, stating that stupid fiends should just die quietly. The men's eyes start to glow red as they looked at him, ready to throw down. The outcome? A bloody hand is sticking out of glowing blue spikes, and the protagonist stands in the bloody laundry, saying they were definitely small fry, trusted only to deliver orders. Junho touches the dial on his watch, saying that the conversation with the watchdogs would be different. The voice of the man he called picks up the phone, sounding displeased. It's Daeok-gu, and he calls our man a bloody bastard, annoyed that it was 2:30 a.m. Junho apologizes for waking him up so early and says he's got a favor to ask. Daeok-gu asks if he is in danger, but our protagonist is the danger. He tells him no, he just wants to participate in an auction being held in Las Vegas, but he couldn't get in without an invitation. He asks him if he could get him one, and the Daeok-gu feels kinda offended, reminding him once again that he's the president of the Korea Players Association, so of course he could get him one. The man tells him to say the name of the hotel he is staying at along with his room number. When Junho reaches the hotel, he learns the auction will be hosted there the next day. Today, he's just getting a feel for the place and decides he won't need the fancy suit Daeok-gu sent over. Apparently, it's some super expensive suit made from Queen Silkworm silk, but Junho doesn't see the point. No need for that kind of flash. As he walks through the hotel, he spots a casino. Curious, he decides to go in, since he's never actually stepped foot in one before. Just as he's about to go in, the alarms go off, and security's yelling at him to stop. He turns around, and the blonde dude with sunglasses walks up to him. The guy, who Junho remembers seeing in Insadong next to that girl with the crown, asks if he's Junho. Turns out he's Ha Inho from the Dokebi Guild, on team leader Gong Juha's squad. Junho remembers meeting him the first time he met the princess. He was standing behind her, and the height difference was very evident. In the protagonist's mind, he makes fun of both their names. Apparently, Ha-in means servant, and Gong-ju means princess. But their given names are very common. Ha-inho asks what brings him to Vegas, and Junho shows him a hologram, explaining he's here for the artifact auction starting tomorrow. He just couldn't stand the thought of sitting in his room all day, so he decided to take a little tour. Inho explains his team's handling security for the auction, and is actually on patrol duty right now. The golden signs along the hallway flash as they walk, and Inho asks if Junho's interested in checking out the casino. Junho's like, yeah, he was just about to, but suddenly those alarms go off again. Inho, walking beside him, offers to help sort it out and explains that casino security got a major upgrade because, since the world changed, they've been losing big money to players. Apparently the casino had to adapt after players started using their abilities to cheat. So now, They're letting players use their powers in here, and even the dealers are players. The casino doors open to reveal a grand hall packed with gaming tables, and Junho raises a brow, wondering if high-level players would just wipe the casino out. But Inho, adjusting his glasses, says it's not that simple. Sometimes, a player's skill level doesn't decide everything. Apparently he was talking about our princess, who lost yet another game after she had lost a lot. She hasn't won any in her life even. She's got that Tsunade luck. Gong Juha, looking totally defeated, says that it has to be a scam. She can't believe it, calling out the dealer for cheating. Ha Inho casually talks to Junho about how this game isn't something you can win with logic or quick thinking. Here, it's all about sharp eyesight. Junho, a bit nervous, takes a seat next to Gong Juha, asking if it's really as fun as it looks. Gong Juha screams that it's not because she's been losing a lot, then suddenly realizes who she's talking to real quick. She jokes about him joining her as a sidekick, and he just waves it off. She laughs it off too, teasing him, and asks what he's up to here. He explains he's in town for the auction tomorrow and figured he'd explore the place a bit first. Gong Juha points at herself, claiming she's here because of Inho. She also says she's actually the head of hotel security, which gets Junho wondering, she's technically on duty but still here betting? A bit awkward, he thanks her and looks over at the golden bells, asking if the game's really that hard. Gong Juha warns him not to bother, pointing out a guy in a white mask, the dealer. She explains this guy has crazy fast hands, supposedly from his time working on the second floor. Junho's curious and asks if they know who these dealers really are, but she just confirms they all wear masks. Junho signals for an attendant, figuring it makes sense that they're hiding the dealer's skills here. Eyeing the black and white chips on the table, Gong Juha asks if he's planning to go all in right from the start. Junho decides he'll take it slow to get a feel for the pace and keep up with the dealer's hands. Meanwhile, Gong Juha is still complaining about losing constantly, wondering if she's gotten used to the dealer's moves yet. She tries to save herself the embarrassment as the dealer asks if they're ready to start, and Junho agrees. The dealer swiftly covers the ball with a golden bell, and his hands are a blur over the table as he shuffles the bells around. Gong Juha, convinced this time she's got it, confidently points at the last bell on the left, saying she saw it for sure. Closing her eyes with a smile, she even starts placing her chips, only to be met with a suggestion that maybe betting isn't really her strong suit. Junho turns to her, figuring she has no skills whatsoever, and goes with the bell in the middle. To his surprise, he lifts it and bingo! There's the ball. He looks at her and congratulates her. Junho says that beginners must have some serious luck. The princess, though, just gives him a warning, saying beginners only get that one lucky shot, so he might want to quit while he's ahead. Looking defeated, she admits she kept playing because she just couldn't win a single round. Some gambling issue there. Please don't try this at home, or in a casino, obviously. Junho laughs and tells her it's tough luck before turning away. Then, he overhears someone being called Boney. A girl in a sleek black dress approaches, asking if they're ready to play, and the guy at the table says that he hates being called Boney. Sizing them up, Junho figures they're up to no good with their sly expressions. He senses the luck swinging his way, as that just means he doesn't have to look for them, and it reminds him of stray dogs hanging around a laundry room. He can't just jump into a fight with them until he's sure they're the real deal. They're not about to expose themselves that easily, so he knows he has to play this smart and set the scene just right. He tells the princess he's actually finding this game way more fun than he expected, and says he wants a couple more rounds. She just shakes her head, probably thinking he's got some early-stage gambling addiction. The dealer, noticing there are 3 now, announces he'll add 2 more containers, setting down 5 golden bells as the fiends look on, ready to pounce on their next move. They each make their choices. The girl going with the middle bell, Junho picking the one on the far right, and the boneless dude picking the rightmost bell too. The dealer flips over Junho's bell, revealing the ball, and congratulates him and the other sad boy. Gong Juha says even luck is a skill, and Junho looks at the brown-haired girl to his left. As she elbows her friend, he decides that this skinny guy sitting across from him might be the tougher nut to crack in this game. On the green table sits this little metal ball, surrounded by piles of colorful chips. The princess points at them all, and she's looking right at the main guy, wondering how he's so good at this stuff. Junho explains that he picked up the tricks from a buddy. He remembers what Gilbert said, that to spot someone's tricks, you shouldn't look at the shell, but look at the substance instead. He adds that it doesn't matter if you're stronger or weaker than the opponent, it's all about their technique. Right now, they're all at the casino table, and the dealer's ready to start. The princess is eyeing the dealer's fast hands, watching every quick move. Junho stays glued to what's going on, figuring it's not the containers he needs to focus on, but the dealer's sneaky illusions. The masked guy's hands are practically on fire, flying across the bells. Junho and the dude in the purple jacket both pick the 1 second from the left. They lock eyes on it, and sure enough, they get it right. Then, the guy in the mask awkwardly says the dealer's being swapped out and asks everyone to stay seated. Junho looks at Gong Juha and decides to pass the time by showing her a cool artifact. Digging into his pocket, he pulls out this blue compass. The princess gets surprised, curious about what he's holding. Everyone's watching as Junho explains he got the compass from Deok-gu, the president. When filled with magic, it can track special people. The girl asks about it again, and the compass needle whips around. Junho says that nobody here seems to be who they're looking for. But then Gong Juha catches the needle actually pointing toward their own teammates. She asks if it's for real, and Junho just stares, baffled, thinking it's got to be broken. He says he's going to the restroom, and the princess tells him not to take long. She's dying to know more. Another dude stands up too, saying he needs the restroom. The brown-haired girl asks if he'll be quick, and he says he'll be back in 5 minutes. As he heads out, there are metal balconies along the glass walls. Junho races ahead and stops in a corner. Suddenly, a guy in a purple suit shows up behind him, looking all calm. He remarks that the restroom's actually the other way. But this guy's onto something. He suspects the artifact is really tracking down fiends. Now knowing they're close, he's been led right here. Junho shows the guy a compass, then slams it down, smashing it. The enemy just stares, baffled, wondering how it broke so easily. Must be fake, he thinks. Junho, standing in the gateway, pulls out a knife, and the guy asks if he led him here on purpose. Junho smiles and basically says that he had him all figured out. Back in the casino, a glowing blade appears in the dude's hand. He wants to know what Junho actually knows about them. Junho replies that he knows enough, even what they're up to tomorrow. That's enough to make the fiend's eyes go red. Gripping his blade, he warns Junho that their talk is about to be over. The guy rushes forward, attacking in a flash. Junho dodges, realizing just how fast this guy is. He thinks, it's not just strength, there's something else boosting his speed. As he watches, he gets that his opponent's trying to assess his skill level. The fiend tells Junho to just give up and go out peacefully. He believes Junho won't be able to dodge much longer. Junho closes his eyes, staying silent. The enemy figures Junho's realized he can't keep up with the speed visually. He eyes 2 weak points on Junho, head and heart, perfect spots for a fatal strike. Planning to fake out Junho by aiming for his head but actually going for his heart, he zooms in for the attack. Junho stands ready, holding his weapon steady. Just then, a bright blue flash lights up, confusing the enemy, who thinks it's some kind of smokescreen. Black flashes hide Junho's figure, and the fiend rushes in, yelling that his blade's already aimed at Junho's heart. But suddenly the enemy feels his hand freeze, shocked as Junho catches him mid-attack. The fiend drops to one knee, as Junho calmly explains that he doesn't need the same speed if he can predict the guy's moves. He taps his own head, explaining that he knew exactly what the fiend would do, go straight for the heart. The fiend gets real mad and asks him to shut up as Junho points out that all that speed is pointless if his attacks are so predictable. The enemy, frustrated, pulls out another blade and yells at him to shut up. Junho catches his wrist, blocking the strike as the guy's other hand freezes too. The protagonist then goes ahead to slash the guy, and as he looks down at his bloodied opponent, he says that being too careful can also be dangerous. Meanwhile, the brown-haired girl stands by the window, arms crossed, and remains silent. She says that she doesn't want to admit it, but the protagonist is a much better strategist than he might seem. She tells Arma that the fact their teammate hasn't returned yet means that he has already been taken out. Frowning, she says that he said he would be back in 5 minutes and that he has everything under control. Then she hears a question. What does he look like? Arma touches his watch, hearing her answer that it is an Asian man. He is there with Gong Juha from the Dokaebi Guild, so most likely, he is their ward. A blue window with photos appears in front of the man. He tells the girl that this is a list of all the players who are currently in the title and asks her to find it. The girl looks at the photos of the guy, and she immediately gets shocked. She looks at the photo of the protagonist and says that it is him. She is sure. Arma, with his arms crossed, looks at the photo. He touches the image with his finger, thinking that it is strange. This is a rookie who has only debuted 2 months ago. There is no way his subordinate would lose to him. The man looks at the screen carefully. There is an image of an article with photos. He says that this guy is related to the Shadow Brothers. The subordinate comes closer and asks if this is really the guy who entered the Eastern Gate with them, with the image of Junho shining. The girl thinks that maybe he came to them on purpose, but that would mean that the Shadow Brothers died not because of simple bad luck, but because of this guy. Arma says that from now on, he is considered a threat. Looking ahead, he tells the subordinate to find him and get rid of him at once. Later on, it's time for the event we've all been waiting for. The valet dude opens the car door, and Junho comes out of the car in an expensive black suit, and then he goes to the door with the guards. One of the guards apologizes and asks to show his invitation. Junho holds out a black envelope. The man looks at the black envelope with a gold seal and then points to the entrance. The hero asks if he doesn't need to go through security, and the man says that there is no need. This entrance is for regular guests, and for VIP clients, the entrance is on the other side. In the reflection of the window, you can see how the man is being checked with a metal detector. Junho thinks he should be a VIP client. Did Gong Juha make arrangements with them? He notices something ahead. The Princess Gong Juha is standing at the counter with a box in her hands and says that it is very hot in there. The protagonist feels like he has just remembered her. After putting the box down, the girl orders iced tea with a lot of ice. The hero comes up and sees how she makes a gesture and asks for 20 servings. She turns to him when he calls out to her. Turning around, the princess asks who it is, playfully referring to him as Mr. Snakehead, who ran away yesterday after saying he was just going to the restroom. Junho asks if she was waiting for him to come back yesterday. The princess angrily asks if he is asking seriously. When he starts saying something, he should not forget to finish. She couldn't sleep last night because she was very curious to know what kind of ice compass it is. She basically stayed up all night thinking about it. The protagonist says he's sorry, and the princess angrily asks if that's all he can do. Waving his hands, the hero says that next time he will treat her to a meal. Turning away, Gong Juha says that then he should treat her to something expensive. Junho looks at the blue box and asks what it is for, to which he receives the answer that it is a refrigerator for cold drinks and ice cream. Looking away in surprise, the girl tells Junho to get ready. The round door seems to have a red aura. She says that once the auction begins, a heated battle will break out. Junho notices that she really doesn't like heat despite being a master of this element. Fanning herself with her hand, Gong Juha says that it annoys her that she is always hot. She certainly is. Standing at the display case, she wishes our hero good luck and says that she hopes he enjoys the auction, and she still has to pick up her order so he can go ahead. Junho agrees. He turns around, looking at the humming girl, and he hopes that everything will be peaceful for her as well. Gong Juha enters and stands in the hall. She's holding her mini freezer box, saying that the hall is very spacious. The princess walks down the aisle, looking at the people sitting there, thinking that maybe she's imagining it because she's sitting in the front rows for security. But the people sitting there are mostly celebrities, the Queen of England, and the president of the French Players Association. Looking ahead, Gong Juha thinks that she's a little nervous, but since they're so close to the stage, she can immediately figure out the situation. She notices one of the chairs and checks if it has the number A14. The princess sits down and says hello with a smile, and then she realizes that Junho is sitting next to her. Covering her mouth with her hand, she whispers that all the seats are assigned in advance, so he can't sit wherever he wants. Taking out a black envelope, Junho asks her if this isn't seat A13, telling her that his invitation says so. The girl opens the envelope in surprise. She takes out a black invitation with monograms and says that he has a VIP invitation. Even she can only get the invitation that is a lower level. She notices the expensive suit of the guy and thinks that now that she looks closely, she can see that he dressed up. He debuted only 2 months ago, but he's already receiving privileges of this level. Shocked, she asks if he didn't spend all the money he earned at the casino yesterday. The guy asks in surprise, and she hands him the invitation, saying that his outfit looks very expensive. But even if he spent all the money, how did he manage to get this ticket? Putting the envelope in his pocket, Junho replies that President Deok-gu got it for him. He also prepared clothes and provided him with a room at the hotel. The princess responds, understanding in discreet jealousy. She says that she didn't know that the president appointed him as his heir, adding that he's amazing for holding such a post. The protagonist replies that it's something else. He's not the president's heir. The heroine presents the black invitation and says that it can't be, he doesn't have to hide it. She's not that stupid. Yes, she is. No one can get this invitation unless they're one of the most powerful people in this country. Junho scratches his head, thinking that she's getting carried away, but he can't even refuse. He laughs and says that he feels a little awkward about it. He feels maybe that's why Deok-gu sent him these clothes. He should interrogate him when he gets back. Holding the box in her hands, Gong Juha asks what he wants to buy, but the guy replies that nothing special comes to mind. He asks her the same question, and she touches her chin and answers with all seriousness that likewise, she didn't come here to have fun. She's a professional, so her priority is work. Junho watches her fan herself from the heat, and sees how ironic it is that this is the speech of someone who gambled in the casino during business hours, but he's still glad that she's here. He remembers using the skill on the dead guy and thinks that he had originally planned to deal with the watchdogs himself, but after reading the memories, he changed his mind. Apparently, that team packs a punch, and he won't be able to defeat their team leader Arma on his own. Junho sits next to the girl, who is sipping on a cold smoothie to cool off, and thinks that whether he likes it or not, he will need the help of the Dokaibi Guild during the battle. He opens the program that has a picture of the Heaven's Breath, and thinks that if the legend of the J Commander's strength is true, he will be able to get more than just him. The lights in the hall go out, and a man appears on the stage and addresses the audience. The man thanks them for their patience and announces that the auction will be starting right now. On a bright red pillow inside this fancy glass case sits a sparkling crown. There's a bunch of congratulatory talk going around for contestant A14, who's just won the ice crown. Junho watches as Gong Juha asks if there's anything else chill in the mix. He's pretty sure she's got every cold artifact known to humanity by now. Except Cole Palmer, maybe. He thinks about how she once said real pros get their jobs done thoroughly. She just points, saying true pros can juggle it all. And by the way, isn't he gonna buy something here? Junho looks toward the guy at the podium and figures he'll buy if anything actually catches his eye. His friend looks at him, all curious, wondering if he's not dying to snag some new gear. Junho holds up his black sword, uniform, and a flashy red pendant, thinking nothing here even comes close to the stuff he used back in the day. The world really got nerfed real bad. There's a diamond shape on his card, so he ends up grabbing just one little necklace. The princess looks at the screen, surprised, and asks why he's buying it. She's curious about its function, noting it just speeds up stamina recovery. She also teases, asking if it's a gift from his girlfriend. Junho hears this, smiling and thinking she should maybe ask if he even has a girlfriend first. She keeps it going, suggesting his mom maybe. His sullency makes her wonder if his mom had died. Then realizing that could be very awkward, she stops and whispers something about maybe keeping quiet from now on. Junho finally explains it's for his nephew, which settles things. Just then, the man at the podium points to a mysterious cube, announcing the return of an ancient item, one that's been part of the auction forever. Everyone's looking as this dark ball with golden cracks shows up on the red pillow. It's called the Unknown Ball, and it grabs Junho's attention right away. His keen intuition skill kicks in, and he's curious why it's going off over this lopsided old ball. The guys sitting behind him start whispering, wondering why anyone cares since it's been stuck here for years and still has no purpose. The auctioneer admits no one's cracked its mystery. Even the last buyer returned it. Junho, eyeing the thing, wonders who'd waste money on it. But with his intuition skill flashing, he decides to trust his gut one more time and hits the red button in his hand. Gong Juha peeks over at the remote, suddenly interested, and asks if he's actually going to buy this thing. The host announces the ball has sold for $60,000, leaving the princess stunned and, just like that, wanting it too. The guy at the podium, arms wide, announces that this moment is the highlight of the day. The crowd buzzes, thrilled as the last item, item 85, is finally up next. Apparently, it's a blue glowing orb is tucked under a glass cover. No, it's not some mobile Rasengan, this is Heaven's Breath, a supercharged magic core that practically hums with power. It's super OP. The princess admires it a lot, saying it's gorgeous, with blue magic swirling inside like a mini storm. She's pretty sure the stories about its energy supply aren't just rumors. This thing could actually keep a whole city running. Junho crosses his arms, asking her what kind of price tag she'd slap on something like that. She just smiles, saying it's going to be way beyond his guess, especially if a few country leaders start bidding. Junho sees as numbers flash and rise fast on the big screen, reaching eye-watering heights. The bidding hits $450 million, jumps to $470 million, and then $500 million. Soon enough, it's soaring at $600 million. Suddenly, there's a loud crash as stones come crashing down on stage. The auctioneer drops, looking around in shock, but Inho's a quick one, isn't he? He's thrown up a green shield that saves the guy just in time. Junho's impressed at the massive shield appearing so quickly and thinks this is why Inho's got the Guardian Knight nickname. Then skeletons with weapons slam into the barrier. Junho realizes this is no regular ambush. It's gotta be fiends behind this madness. Juha suspects it's the work of the skeleton mage, that same dude who caused havoc in Turkey. She looks at her wrist screen, calling out that they need to get people out and, if possible, save the auction items too. She points at Inho, telling him to grab Heaven's Breath before they go after the mage. She looks over for Junho, but he's vanished as usual when the auction hall needed him the most, leaving her wondering where he ran off to this time. Funny enough, he's not frozen in ice anymore. The crowd panics, pushing toward the exit, while a guard tries to calm everyone, saying they're safe under the barrier. But one guy under the green dome points at the advancing skeletons, saying they're about to break through. The place is packed with people trying to shove their way out, and amidst the chaos, Gong Juha smashes a hole in the wall, telling everyone to use it as an exit. Ha Inho reminds her that the building isn't exactly cheap, but she doesn't care. People's lives come first. He half smiles, saying she did the right thing, but asks her not to bring him up in the apology letter later. She rolls her eyes, hoping he won't make her regret it. Out of nowhere, a portal appears, and before anyone can react, Ha In-ho gets 360 no-scoped. Gong Joo-ha screams, horrified, watching her comrade collapse. After Ha In-ho gets sniped like a Call of Duty bot, cracks start forming on that green barrier around them. In-ho's down on the floor, gripping his hurt shoulder. The princess says something about the magic shield vanishing because he got hurt. Quite the observant one she is. She turns her back on the skeletons creeping in and says she'll hold them off while they hunt down the skeleton mage calling the shots. The princess cracks her knuckles, looking a little too excited, saying she'll burn every one of them to ashes. As the armored skeletons come marching, Gong Joo-ha tightens her fist, and orange flames blaze up. Suddenly, a tower of fire shoots right through the building's roof, roasting the skeletons to a crisp. A big flash lights up the area, and on one rooftop there's a shadow of a girl who's just stunned. The sniper chick can't believe one person's pulling this off. She watches Gong Joo-ha fight through her camera feed and figures this has to be the S-class skill, Ruler of Flames. She says there's no way she'd ever want to mess with someone like that. Blowing a bubble with her gum, she thinks the sniper should just stick to long-range shots. Her screens show people running for it, while Gong Joo-ha stands there with flames all around her, next to the injured Ha In-ho. Then, the sniper spots Heaven's Breath lying next to him and realizes that's her target. She lifts her hand, opening a tiny black portal to snatch the sphere. As it pops out of the portal, she's practically glowing with excitement as she found the Heaven's Breath. On the rooftop, the commander asks if she got the thing. She replies saying of course she's got it, even asking him who he thinks she is. That is quite some confidence there. The commander tells her to head to point B, and she's feeling good about how smooth everything went. Only thing missing? She's kinda disappointed Jun-ho didn't fall into her hands this time. She really wanted to pop some main character noggin. The sniper spots someone sprinting down the road, and Shabu couldn't believe her eyes when she realizes it's Jun-ho. She immediately kneels down, aiming her rifle right at his head, promising herself she'll finish him off with a quick, clean shot. She opens up a black portal, firing right through it, with smaller portals popping up in the air, all leading to where Jun-ho is. One portal appears just next to Jun-ho's head, but the sniper is shocked by what she sees next. She expected him to go down easy, but somehow, he dodges in a way she just can't wrap her head around. She's steaming now, thinking no one, even top fighters like Ha In-ho, should be able to pull that off. Furious, she takes aim again, determined this time she'll end it. Jun-ho stops, taking a quick look at the portal surrounding him. With a serious look, he activates his shadow attack skill and just vanishes, leaving behind a dark aura. The sniper is really surprised as she stands there on the rooftop, stunned. She has no clue where he used his instant transmission to go to. Then, all of a sudden, the rooftop starts freezing over. She turns and sees herself getting encased in ice, the pressure making cracks in the layer around her. Behind her stands Jun-ho, giving off this chilling energy with his sword in hand, looking cold, literally, and focused. She barely manages to ask what kind of monster he is and how he even pulled that off. Jun-ho just looks at her, lifting his sword, and asks her if knowing would change anything. He raises his sword higher, saying that her whole team of watchdogs is about to be wiped off the map tonight. Then he sends her to Jesus. Meanwhile, the auction hotel's still on fire, with busted skeletons scattered everywhere. Gong Joo-ha has her arms out, completely surrounded by flames, complaining about how insanely hot it is. The princess, looking a bit nervous but still trying to stay calm, says that once all this is over, she's taking a vacation straight to Antarctica. A guy in a suit calls out to Gong Joo-ha and she turns, worried. The dude tells her they've got a problem. They can't find Heaven's Breath. He's got the injured Ha In-ho slung over his back, and Gong Joo-ha looks stumped. He says it must have vanished in all the commotion, so they'd better start checking around. The princess suddenly looks horrified, realizing no one had even gotten close to it. Sparks are still popping off from the fire, and Gong Joo-ha turns back, spotting her friends fending off another attack. Out of the flames, a bony leg steps forward. More armored skeletons are here, this time looking like realistic withered skeletons straight from Minecraft. Gong Joo-ha just stares them down, totally lost as to who these enemies even are. Gong Joo-ha and her team stand surrounded by the bunch of creepy skeletons. Gong Joo-ha notices that these aren't just any skeletons, they're blacker, which somehow makes them even worse. She looks at her teammate, who's pretty banged up, and wonders how they're struggling this much. After all, she handpicked these people for their skills, so they should be able to handle a few boneheads. Suddenly, one brown-haired dude tells her that there's something up. Apparently, the skeleton's gear looks oddly familiar. Gong Joo-ha tells him to get to the point. Turns out, he's remembering old missing persons cases from 3 years back. She asks him what that has to do with this. He tells her that he was in charge of investigations about it before, so his memory is quite fresh, and from those fresh memories, those clothes the skeletons are wearing aren't Halloween costumes. Yup, the mystery skeletons might just be players who vanished on the second floor. Juha is stunned as she realizes that these skeletons are actually those lost players. Meanwhile, in a flashback, Arma's chilling on a couch, plotting something big. He's got his arms crossed, telling the sniper he'll pull a distraction at the auction so they can swipe Heaven's Breath. Arma casually adds that they'll regroup at the Cheryl Hotel after grabbing the prize and reminds her to avoid contact with dangerous players. Back to the protagonist, who's staring down at a bloody scene, piecing things together. He realizes this poor girl's memory is a mess with zero intel on the Fiend Association, mostly because their boss doesn't share squat with nobody. The protagonist figures he'll need to dig into the skeleton mage's memories next. Images of skeletons breaking through barriers flash in his mind, and he suspects these skeletons are players who got mixed up with Nazad Hollow's twisted crew and are now being used as puppets. In the present, he's visualizing the auction layout and Arma's hideout, which is booby-trapped with magic. Charging in without a plan would be a one-way ticket to doom. Then he looks at the sniper's watch, sparking a bright idea. Meanwhile, Arma, with magic symbols hovering above him, is typing on his watch, confused by a message from the sniper chick saying she's being tailed by someone sketchy, neither Junho nor a Dokkaebi guild member. Arma asks about the artifact, but the sniper chick says she's gonna have to ditch it in an alley by the hotel, leaving it to be picked up by a squad. She adds that she'd leave their mark there so it could be spotted. Arma starts feeling like there's a whole other player involved here, someone neither Junho nor the Dokkaebi guild. He's not thrilled, in fact, the baldy dude snaps his fingers like he just realized how bad things are. Sand starts swirling around him, and in a blink of an eye, he teleports right to the street, near a glowing sign that he thinks marks the spot for his squad. He looks around and spots a trash can, figuring that this search just got a lot easier. As he opens the lid, he sees a blue glow. It's the Heaven's Breath, an ultra-powerful magic core. Arma grabs it, feeling the power in his hands, only to realize it's freezing. The core starts cracking right in his grip and breaks, leaving him totally startled and caught off guard. He holds his frozen hand in frustration as he realizes he's been tricked. Somebody set a trap with concentrated magic, and now he's gone from a skeleton mage to a gullible mage with skeleton emojis. He tries to get a grip and figures the person behind this trickery must be nearby. His eyes go red with rage, and suddenly skeletons are crawling out of the ground. He's summoning an army of the dead to guard himself. He says that HW didn't want to use his full power, but now, he's going all out. Just as he's about to rally his skeleton crew, the protagonist appears right behind him with a sword, catching him off guard. He tells him that his powers aren't bad, except for the fact that he's defenseless when he's doing his undead summoning jutsu. Before Arma could react, the protagonist drives his sword straight into his chest. Arma spits blood, totally caught off guard and realizing too late that he'd been set up from the start. He sinks down, exhausted, looking at Junho, the protagonist, and asks his name. Junho, looking like he's got no sympathy to spare, just stares at him coldly, wondering why he should even bother answering the dying man's last question. He asks him how many questions he's answered from the many people he's killed. The skeleton mage goes silent as the protagonist's sword swings one last time. The whole scene shifts as the skeletons start crumbling into sand, fading away. Gong Juho watches, stunned, as her teammate inspects the sand that was once skeletons. Everyone's left wondering if the skeleton mage called them back, or if it's the protagonist's doing. Either way, it's all turning to dust right before their eyes. The protagonist stands over the skeleton mage's body, with his sword dripping with blood, when a system window pops up in front of him. He's surprised to see he leveled up twice. Apparently Arma's level is way higher than his. He looks back at the dead skeleton mage chilling against the wall, thinking how if he hadn't fallen for that trap, Arma might be the one standing victorious. Reaching out, he tries to extract memories from the skeleton mage's head. He's curious now. In the memories, he sees a girl and some guys chatting about a summoning system, and the girl thinks it's a pretty neat ability. Then there's Arma, sitting by a puddle, looking at himself like he's some top dog, bragging that his abilities would impress Nazad Hollow. Junho realizes Arma was made the leader of a squad of watchdogs, plotting to dominate the tower. Junho realizes he's getting just fragments of what really happened. The system pops up again, saying the memories can't be fully accessed because of his low ability level. He's frustrated, knowing he's missing the important stuff. Standing next to the skeleton mage, he thinks even these fragments could help. He's annoyed, comparing the fiends to parasites. He thinks about how they used orphans, treating them like trash. If they couldn't handle the brutal training, they just got tossed aside like yesterday's leftovers. Looking at a young Arma, he connects the dots and realizes Arma, who went on to commit mass murder, also came from that same orphanage. He knows he has to stop this madness to prevent more monsters from being created. Jun-ho's thoughts drift to Nazad Hollow, remembering a guy in a light coat who might be one of the Fiend Association leaders, but he's not sure. He turns away from the skeleton mage and tells his mentor and the students to enjoy themselves while they can, because soon he'll rip the fiends out by their roots and send them packing straight to hell. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Gong Juha is feeling drained, chilling back on a couch. She asks her teammates why they still haven't found the core. One guy apologizes, saying they're still searching. Gyeong Juha reflects on her missed chance to escape with the heaven's breath, wishing they'd tracked the magic sooner. Tired, she leans back, asking what the time is, and learns it's already 7 a.m. She covers her face in frustration, wishing she could have just had a peaceful sleep in the hotel instead of dealing with these annoying fiends. Ha In-ho calls her name, and when she asks what now, he's holding a small blue box saying someone sent her a gift. Gong Juha wonders if it's another fan gift. She asks why they always send her stuff when she's asked for no gifts unless it's an event. Ha In-ho, looking a bit confused, says the box has several things inside. Juha, now curious, asks what's in it. Something weird? Ha In-ho assures her it's nothing strange. When she opens the box, she sees the magic core inside. Ha In-ho thought she'd be surprised, and she gets real excited. She smiles at him, saying it looks just like the original one from the auction, and Ha In-ho confirms that it's indeed the original. Gong Juha screams loud and slams the box shut, staring at Ha In-ho and asking if it's genuine and if the skeleton mage didn't swipe it. Ha In-ho explains that's why he thought she'd be surprised. He says there's a note in English, asking if she wants to see it. The princess takes the note, which says that alongside the skeleton mage, 2 other fiends have been taken out, and they're returning the heaven's breath. It adds that the skeleton mage is in the alley next to the hotel and refers to him as her passing fan. Gong Juha stares at Ha In-ho, confused about what her so-called fan is waffling about. Ha In-ho insists it's true, and she wonders why she should be involved since she didn't do anything. He looks at the tired princess and explains that thanks to her, he avoids a penalty for not fulfilling the contract, saying he's afraid to think what would have happened if her fan hadn't found the heaven's breath. Juha expresses her gratitude, but now she wants to know who it was so she can meet them. The dude shares that he had checked the skeleton mage's body for clues. Meanwhile, Arma's lifeless body still lies against the wall. Ha In-ho notes that the fan left no trace, indicating that it's a professional job. As Gong Juha looks up at the ceiling, the protagonist walks in. Ha In-ho says that such skills suggest this person isn't a low ranker, but he has no clue who it could be. Gong Juha eagerly asks about the identity of this mysterious figure, jumping up from the couch and pointing to the side. The protagonist turns to her, wishing her a good morning, but she looks back, clearly displeased. She angrily asks how he could run away during such a critical situation. Jun-ho awkwardly looks away. Realizing she's referring to the previous day, he thinks it probably seemed that way to her. Gong Juha throws her hands up, scolding him. She reminds him that last time he said he was just stepping out to the restroom but ended up running away, labeling him a habitual offender. She tells him that the citizens come first, and if he had powers, he should use it on them, not coming back when the dust is settled like some commercial, raising her index finger like a teacher scolding a student. She then recalls what Spectre said, that power exists to protect the people. Confused, the protagonist asks when he said that, but she clarifies that it wasn't him who said it. It was Spectre. Jun-ho remembers that he's keeping that identity a secret, and remembers when Spectre always had scripted interviews, so he didn't even remember those words. She warns him not to run away next time something happens, and to prioritize the safety of the citizens. He tells her that he'd remember that, and that he is sorry, admitting he was wrong the day before. Juha smiles, pleased that he's reflecting on his actions so quickly. She hands him the note, asking if he knows who it may be. As she reads the note, she smiles, revealing that one of her fans, a skeleton mage, sent her a heaven's breath last night, telling him that this person is definitely a ranker. Jun-ho rubs his chin and says that it's possible for the sender to not be a ranker at all. Juha, looking back to Ha In-ho's account of the skeleton mage's body, dismisses the idea, stating that they found no traces left behind, saying that if a ranker like Ha In-ho can't find anything in the alley, it means it had to be the doing of a ranker or a high-level player. Jun-ho remembers the dead skeleton mage where blood traces were still visible. He remembers that with magic, it's possible to wipe out all traces, a useful trick he learned from Skaya. The princess examines the note some more, noticing the natural handwriting and concluding that the sender most probably spoke fluent English. She wonders if they should track him down, but he quickly adds that the sender will reveal himself if he wants to. The princess stashes the note in her inventory, and she asks if he thinks it would be rude if she went on with it. She says that the auction is over and wonders what he's doing there. Junho explains he's there to pick up the items he won. Gong Juha points him toward the counter, where suited people walk through the lobby. As she asks if he's heading back to Korea, he confirms he is. The princess admits she's a little sad to part ways, smiling at him. She asks again if he's really sure he doesn't want to join their guild. Junho politely declines again, and the princess teasingly says he's hurt her once more. The princess declares that they'll meet again on the second floor, and Junho agrees, assuring her they'll see each other soon. Juha laughs sarcastically, covering her mouth, noting how everyone says that. Junho tells her she'll know when the time comes. She compliments his confidence, extending her hand, smiling. Then she proposes that if he climbs to the second floor within 6 months, she'll give him a gift. He asks what happens if he doesn't make it, and she cheekily replies that then Mr. Snakehead will grant her wish. Junho realizes she's still trying to coax him into the guild. They shake hands, and he warns her not to back out of her promise later. Later on, 2 red boxes sit on the counter, one holding a power recovery necklace, and the other, the unknown ball from the auction. Junho reaches for the ball, sensing an odd intuition about it. He picks it up, feeling nothing at first. But as he focuses, a faint purple aura begins to glow from it. He continues studying the ball, thinking this is all he's got for now. He decides to keep it in his inventory and occasionally test it with magic, believing he'll eventually unlock its secrets. Turning his attention to the other box, he notices a gold icon on it, and just like that, the box appears somewhere else in the second floor. Some dude picks it up, wondering what kind of teleportation technique that is, and who would have done it. Opening the box, he finds a necklace and a note. As he reads it, the note instructs him to take care of himself, and says he'll rise within 6 months, signed simply as your uncle. He says to himself that this person has started moving. This dude is probably the nephew that Junho was talking about. Over at Korea International Airport, the protagonist gets into the car, with Cha Si-eun taking the wheel. She looks in the rearview mirror, noticing his expression and asking if something's bothering him. He admits he didn't expect her to come pick him up. Cha Si-eun just smiles, saying it's her job to pick him up when he returns to Korea, and asks if he has anywhere he needs to go before heading to the association. He reaches into his bag and hands her a gift. She unwraps it, revealing a book. He says he wasn't sure what to get, so he just grabbed this one. Cha Si-eun was really happy as she reads the title, recognizing it as The Youngest Son of the Gates. She tells him she's been wanting a copy for ages but could never find one. He's relieved, glad she likes it. She holds the book to her chest, looking over at him. He says that she can read it right now if she wanted to. She replies that she wishes she could start reading it immediately, but, well, it's still work hours. He asks if there's anything urgent waiting for him. Si-eun says there's nothing pressing. So, he crosses his arms, settling back, saying the time zone shifts got him tired. You know, typical jet lag. He says he'll take a nap, asking her to wake him when they reach the association. She blushes slightly, a little surprised, then tells him goodnight. The next day, over at the association, Deok-gu smiles as he opens a black box from Junho, wondering aloud if it's something expensive. Apparently it's just alcohol, and he jokes that he's been off drinking lately, so he's not sure what to do. Junho tells Deok-gu he's already reached out to Arthur, who'll be arriving soon. Deok-gu sighs heavily, saying that he hasn't seen Arthur since his attempt at the second floor so long ago. It's hard for him to believe how much Arthur's grown since those days. When Deok-gu brings up Arthur's time on the second floor, Junho gives him a serious look, asking what happened. Deok-gu explains that Arthur once mentioned memories of his father and how he chose to descend into the void. Hearing this, Junho remembers his recent conversation with Gong Juha about the unusual invitation he received. Deok-gu smiles, proud, and says that he's worked hard to build Junho's reputation so that no one would dare mess with him. Junho says he needs a favor from both of them. He asks if they can help locate an orphanage. When Deok-gu asks why, Junho reveals what he's discovered about fiends, explaining they're raising orphans to become fiends in some hidden orphanage overseas. Deok-gu slams his fists on the table, outraged that fiends would cross such lines. He pours himself a drink despite his recent vow to quit, but Junho sighs, conjuring up ice cubes and handing them over, reminding him to slow down. As Deok-gu slams his glass down, he says that Kwan Noya has been in touch, saying that he's been working on Junho's sword before he went to America, and that the final adjustments will be ready tomorrow. Apparently, Kwan Noya wants to hand it to him personally. Deok-gu jokes that with all these connections, rumors might start to spread about him. Junho agrees, wondering if maybe joining the Dokaibi Guild as a scout could be the next step he needs to live up to his name. The protagonist heads for the door, waving goodbye to Deok-gu. The director tells him to come back in the morning. Junho says he'll take a break and rest up. Deok-gu calls him a bastard and says he knows he's relieved he's finally about to see Noya again after all these years. The name's got that double meaning, old man, but it works well enough as a name too funny enough. As Junho heads out, Deok-gu's looking all serious, saying that he should start knowing what he would do too, whatever that means. The next day, Junho's smiling, thinking that in 25 years, not much has changed here. As he reaches for the workshop door, he remembers hearing that Noya's grandson took over. He's curious to see if the old man's still the same. Walking in, he hears the steady beat of a hammer on metal. Seems like the old man really got serious about training. Junho's curious to see just how much this once crybaby kid has grown. As he steps in, he spots a big guy with a hammer, sweat dripping down his arm as he works the hot metal all buff and stuff. The guy turns, looking straight at Junho and asking who he is. Junho can't believe it, seeing the little snot-nosed kid he once knew now towering over him. He can't believe this guy's Noya's grandson and wonders what on earth happened in 25 years to turn him into this. The dude finally recognizes him, calling out his name, Junho. He says he got a call from the association and was told to expect a visitor. The big guy, who turns out to be Palmo, which amusingly means Mr. Arm, points him to the passage, saying Noya's likely upstairs. Sure enough, there's the old man, standing around in slippers and calling Junho a rascal, looking like he's already lost his patience. Junho turns and sees him, smiling. It's been ages since they've seen each other. Junho speaks casually to him here, even though traditionally, people normally speak formally to those older than them. Palmo is hella confused, asking if this isn't the first time they're meeting. Kwan Noya asks his grandson to get some agaret tea for their guest, he responds, asking if he's sure that's the one he wants. His grandpa responds, asking him not to make him say it twice. Junho jokes around a bit, saying that Palmo still follows orders from his grandpa without question. Noya sighs like he's heard it all before, saying that Palmo's only obedient when it suits him, otherwise, he's stubborn as a mule. Junho points behind him, saying Noya's endless scolding probably drilled that stubbornness right in. He mentions seeing Palmo at work with the hammer and says it's pretty impressive. Noya, though, just says Palmo's got a mountain left to learn. Junho teases the old man, saying his grandson is still awkward about being praised too. He playfully asks why Noya doesn't seem at all thrilled that he's back, alive and kicking. Noya pauses for a bit, then he steps forward, pats Junho on the shoulder, and says he's been through a lot. Junho says he's just thankful Noya's still in good health. Noya looks at him a bit confused, then asks the unexpected, why exactly did he come back? Junho stares at him, a bit thrown off by the question. Noya explains that Deok-gu gave him the basics, but he never got the full story on why Junho's returned as a player. Junho tells him that seeing is believing, then he snaps his fingers, creating an ice shard right there. Noya stares, watching the blue glow shimmer off the ice shard in awe. He asks if this is the Ice Queen's power, as if still piecing it all together. Junho's sitting on the couch next to Noya, who suddenly stretches out his hand, looking right at him. The old man says that after beating the Ice Queen, Junho's somehow managed to snag her powers, asking if this means he might actually bring his fallen friends back someday. Junho tells him that it's all about giving it his best shot. The protagonist adds that he and the Ice Queen had made a deal a while back, even signed a contract. Noya's looking down at his hand all serious, and suddenly Junho feels a chill like he's been struck by lightning. The old man then asks if Junho signed a contract with Spectre, wondering if he's still a rookie. But then Noya laughs, eyes closed, admitting he's just messing with him. Junho stares, totally lost, while Noya says that he hasn't seen that kind of look on Junho's face in forever. Junho catches on and says, half joking, that Noya didn't call him over just to hand him a sword, but to give him a hard time. But Noya just stands up slowly, pretending not to know what he's talking about, and says something about needing to make a weapon from some nameless dragon's bones, like it's already done and dusted. The protagonist asks if he's serious, and if he actually made the thing already. Noya walks over to a sword stand, pointing like it's obvious, telling him he didn't forget, did he? Noya grabs a black and red sword, saying he hammered it out just for him. He hands it over, asking if this wasn't part of their old promise. Junho stares in shock as Noya smiles like he's got a secret. But then he bursts out, looking annoyed, and yells for Junho to actually test the weapon. Junho unsheathes the sword and finds himself staring at the sleek black blade, amazed at how it just feels perfect in his grip. He's really impressed, thinking it's wild that Noya would remember all these little details even after 25 years. Noya just shakes his head, talking about how nobody else would bring him such a small stash of dragon bones and expect a full-on weapon. Then Noya settles back into his chair, watching as Junho inspects the sword, talking about how he added extra materials to make it tougher and better at channeling magic. He tells Junho to go on, test it out. A system window pops up in front of Junho with a full rundown of the weapon, Black dragon, crazy durable. Blade doesn't dull or rust easily. Wounds made by it won't heal quick, and it even uses blood as a tracker. Junho thinks, yeah, this is exactly what he needs. He looks at the system window, realizing this sword is miles ahead of anything in the association's stash. Lowering the sword, Junho looks back at Noya. The old man looks pleased, saying it's been a good 25 years and reminding him to respect his elders, especially the ones who are supposedly retired and just playing Go. Junho laughs, asking why Noya even bothers with Go when he's never beaten him. Noya looks at him mockingly, daring him to think he's rusty. Right then, Palmo strolls in with a tray of tea. Noya insists it's fancy stuff, warning Junho to be careful not to spill a drop. Junho closes his eyes, taking a sip, telling Noya he's had good tea before. His eyes pop open, staring at the cup in surprise. Noya watches him and asks if he's ever tasted anything like it. Junho's curious, asking what kind of tea this is. Noya just says that he'll only spill the tea if Junho can beat him at Go. They sit down to play, and somehow Junho wins. Noya's in total disbelief, tossing the white stones onto the board, but Junho calmly reminds him that a deal's a deal. Noya starts talking about humanoid races and what they mean now. He says that since the second floor opened, it's not just about monsters that look human. Some of these creatures are smart enough to chat and even bargain with humans. Junho listens, imagining orcs trying to hold a conversation, which is just too weird. He blurts out, asking if this means he could actually talk to an orc. In his head, orcs are just loud, angry creatures, not conversation material. Noya looks serious, explaining that while some humanoids have low intelligence, others can actually communicate. Junho's confused, wondering why Noya even brought this up, and Noya reminds him that he was the one curious about the tea. Noya then explains that this special tea, agarite, is made from leaves grown by elves. Junho stares at his tea, suddenly feeling like he's got a priceless artifact in his hands, and wonders if he might actually track down some of this stuff himself someday. Noya just says that even with a fortune, he'd have no luck finding it, as they haven't exactly started chatting with elves yet. Junho studies his inventory window, realizing it's all coming together. While he's here, he'd asked Noya to take a look at this old cracked stone sphere he's been carrying around. He wonders aloud if Noya recognizes it, but Noya just gives him a look, calling him a fool and reminding him that he's no sage perched up on a bell tower who knows everything. Noya sits back, arms crossed, while Junho's curiosity kicks in. Noya explains that, yes, he does know something about it. Apparently, it's an artifact connected to the elves. Junho's surprised. He can't believe Noya actually knows about this. Noya explains briefly, staring into the distance, saying he once met the elder of the elf tribe himself. Junho's dumbfounded, looking at Noya with confusion, then asks if this means Noya's been on the second floor. Noya shakes his head, explaining that the elves themselves brought him there. Junho's left trying to wrap his head around this, wondering how creatures from the second floor can just waltz down whenever they please. Noya hushes him, saying it's the first level's best-kept secret, and Junho agrees, already catching the hint. Noya describes the elves as magical beings connected to the natural elements, water, earth, trees, all the forces of nature itself. Junho sees a small orb lying on the checkers table, and he picks it up, curious. Noya points out that if Junho's really interested, there's a place where he can meet the elves himself. Among the items in the Elflands, he explains, there's one imbued with the energy of the World Tree, which might just teach him something valuable if he's lucky. Junho stands up, agreeing completely. He's already thinking about how to reach out to his secretary to plan the trip to meet the elves. He heads toward the exit as Noya sips his tea, calling out for him not to stay away too long. Outside, Junho runs into Palmo, who clearly knows that Noya's tough exterior is just an act. Palmo tells him not to worry, explaining that his grandfather struggles to show his feelings. He hands Junho a small box, who looks at it curiously and asks what's inside. Palmo says it's agarite tea leaves, a gift Noya wanted him to pass on. Junho's touched, holding the box in both hands, realizing this is Noya's roundabout way of saying he cares. Junho stands in front of Palmo, tempted to ask him to thank Noya for him, but Palmo just waves his hands, hesitating, then telling him he'll understand soon enough and wishing him a safe trip. As their white car races down the highway under the night sky, Junho brings up the topic of dark elves. Cha Si-yun, who's driving, explains that these elves are known as the Fallen Ones, outcasts who turned against the World Tree. They formed their own tribe, and their territory is infamous for being an insanely tough challenge. She holds up a bottle with a purple potion, adding that if luck's on their side, they could get their hands on a legendary elixir from the Dark Elves' village. Cha Si-yun looks in the rearview mirror, saying that the Dark Elves are currently hiding behind a gate in England, in a forest known as the Wild Forest. She asks if Junho's interested in the mission, and he says he's up for it. She adds that there's more he should know. Then a status window pops up, showing a recent conference with Deokgu. It's the Cheonghai Guild. Junho recognizes them from their time capturing the Cinder Fox, and they're also gearing up to join the Wild Forest quest. Junho's shocked by the thought of running into them again, especially since this gate mission seems to be attracting top players from across the globe. Si-eun fills him in on the details. The gate's hidden within a mysterious, dark forest glowing with purples and sparkles, located in Grantham. The mission is to capture the leader of the Dark Elves. She explains only players between levels 20 and 30 can enter, and there's a cap of 200 participants. Junho's left staring ahead, realizing just how huge this quest really is. Over at the forest, deep inside, there's this tiny beat-up wooden shack just sitting there, and inside, things aren't looking any better. Cal Signer is sitting at a table looking frustrated while he throws a plate against the wall. Someone's definitely in a mood. Cal's asking this blue ghostly spirit if the guard dog squad really just got wiped out like that. He's trying to see if it's playing a prank or something. But nope, the spirit's dead serious, telling him it's true. Cal grabs his head, clearly stressed, while the ghost goes on, saying the skeleton mage can't reach anyone from the squad. There's a rumor they got jumped by some dude named Junho, and Cal's really not happy about it. He knows this is bad news, especially since his boss, Nazad Hallow, really liked those watchdogs like they was his lapdogs. Meanwhile, it's still raining like it's never gonna stop, and Cal's just over here dealing with one problem after another. Not only are they chasing after some big-shot swordmaster, but now this OP Junho guy comes out of nowhere causing trouble. Cal asks the ghost what the big association's reaction is, and the ghost says he put out a report about Junho. But let's be real. Who's gonna believe that some random newbie who just showed up 2 months ago could take out the guard dog squad? Suddenly the doors open and he and the ghost just freeze. Lightning's lighting up the whole place, and there's this old mage with a scary red aura standing right in the doorway looking for Cal. The perfect Halloween entrance, and yup, it's the boss man himself, Nazad Hallow. Cal and the ghost immediately start panicking, hoping not to get fried. Nazad Hallow is clearly not in a great mood. He's been reading reports about Junho and wants to know if it's true that his students got taken out. Cal tells him yeah, it seems like that's what happened, but he's just as confused as anyone. Nazad Hallow isn't really having it. He raises his staff, and before you know it, Cal's slammed against the wall by some dark magic, pinned like a bug. Nazad Hallow wants answers, and I don't know isn't gonna cut it. Cal's struggling to breathe, face going redder than a stop sign, yelling that he really has no clue. Nazad Hallow tightens the magic, and Cal's getting desperate. He tells him that he needs a chance to track down Junho and bring him in. Nazad Hallow finally lets him go, and Cal drops to the ground, gasping for air. The evil wizard dude gives him a deadline, half a year. Cal tells him that to bring a player to the second gate, they have to be at least level 30, so how's a rookie like Junho gonna butt in? Nasty Naz doesn't stick around to chat unless it involves ether. He tells him that it's not his problem, and asks Cal Signer to get it done regardless, leaving him lying on the floor, fuming. I bet the ghost is probably wishing it could be anywhere else, as Cal asks it to find a pathfinder to hunt Junho down. The ghost's got a nervous look, suggesting they use some secret elevator to dodge the association's eyes. Cal's getting back up, clearly with a plan, already thinking about throwing Junho off his trail. He's got it all planned. Step 1, ditch Kim Woo-jong. Step 2, head down to the first floor and stand on business himself. Later on, over some ancient castle in England, somewhere around Grantham. Down on the ground, Junho's just gotten to his hotel. Someone's asking if he made it there okay, and Junho thanks the person for looking out for him. Then the person asks him why he rushed over so fast, given that the main event's still 3 days away. Junho explains he's got plans. There are a bunch of smaller gates around, and he wants to tackle them as a warm-up. Junho remembers sitting in a car with Cha Si-eun, looking a bit down. Cha Si-eun catches on, realizing he's worried about the news of 200 people involved. Somewhere far away, there's a bunch of status screens hanging in the air after the gate, and players start popping into this new world. Out of nowhere, a system appears, and Nasty Naz is holding this giant mechanical scale with monsters on it. The system's supposed to be super fair, balancing things so the players and monsters have an equal shot at the gate. But with 200 people needed for this gate, it's clear the difficulty is way up there. Junho realizes he's in for a tough time. It's not just about fighting, it's about protecting everyone too. 4 days later, the players are gathering around an open portal in the square. Spectators are everywhere, watching like it's some huge event. A girl looking like Little Red Riding Hood is practically buzzing with excitement, feeling the energy from all the players around. Though they don't really look too excited. Little Red Riding Hood points out how all these powerful fighters from different countries are here, along with some fancy gear she's never seen before. This white-haired Vector dude spots their leader, Cha Min-woo, and the girl rushes over to him. Cha Min-woo, looking annoyed, crosses his arms while she starts bugging him, which just makes him angrier. She's smiling, telling him that she knows he's on the hunt for Jun-ho. She teases him, saying that his neck must hurt from holding back all that anger. Cha Min-woo admits he's been waiting for this. He remembers watching Jun-ho fight the Cinder Fox and thinks back on how smooth Jun-ho looked in action. The group leader's a little embarrassed, realizing he's always gone for the easy way out. The protagonist's actions opened his eyes. It was the equivalent of a talk no jutsu. He tells the girl that next time, he'll show Jun-ho his new and improved self. Just then, the girl spots Jun-ho in the distance, picking out a card. She shouts that he's over there, pressing the card in front of him and apparently signing off a package. Cha Min-woo strolls over, with Little Red Riding Hood hyping him up from the background like his personal hype man. The team leader stands in front of Jun-ho and our hero recognizes him as part of that Cinder Fox capture. Jun-ho, glad to see a familiar face, remembers him and thanks him, remembering how Min-woo carried him after it was all over. Min-woo says it's him who should be grateful and tells Jun-ho he's got an offer. Jun-ho's a bit puzzled. Then Cha Min-woo jumps right in, asking if he's already in a party.